40 years old, married to her son's classmate. No, no, don't do it in front of my son. Ye Rong blushed and shyly turned her head away, fearing that her movements would wake up her son. Next to the single bed, her 20-something son Shu Song was sleeping soundly, and even snoring could be heard. Ye Rong was pressed down by Gu Yanchen at the end of the bed. Although he was the same age as her son, he was mature and unfathomable. I touch my own wife. Gu Yanchen teased in Ye Rong's ear in a low voice. Sure enough, the young man in his 20s was as energetic as a wolf. This old aunt really couldn't stand it. Don't do it here. She blinked her big wet eyes and shyly refused. Although Ye Rong was 41 years old, the collagen on her face had not been completely lost. Except for the faint fine lines at the corners of her eyes, she looked like she was in her 20s. Gentle and charming, mature and intellectual, she exuded a different style everywhere. Gu Yanchen picked her up horizontally with a whoosh, and said affectionately and domineeringly, "Then let's go home." Ye Rong was so shocked that she almost screamed, and hugged Gu Yanchen's beautiful neck tightly. "Quick, put me down." "Sure, don't move." Ye Rong immediately shut up. "Xiaosong drank too much, I'm worried about him, you go home first tonight." Although the two have already obtained the certificate, she is still not used to being too close to each other. Gu Yanchen said coquettishly with a small face, "Then can you bear to let me stay alone in the empty room?" This coquettish Gu Yanchen is very different from the image of a decisive and domineering boss in the company on weekdays. But there is no extra bed here. Ye Rong looked around in embarrassment. There was only a single bed in the small room. "You still have to go to work tomorrow, you can't rest badly." Gu Yanchen was still not satisfied. But she still considerately put Ye Rong down gently, and said lovingly, "Okay, I'll listen to you, madam." She sent Gu Yanchen to the door, and Gu Yanchen turned his head and said affectionately, "Then I'm so obedient, should you reward me?" Ye Rong was slightly stunned, and Gu Yanchen lowered his tall head and kissed her red lips with his thin lips. It was just a light kiss, and then he left purely and neatly. Ye Rong lowered her head shyly. "Don't do this next time." "That means it's okay this time." Without waiting for Ye Rong to react, Gu Yanchen kissed her deeply again. After ending a lingering kiss, Gu Yanchen raised his hand to tidy up Ye Rong's messy collar. "Have a good rest, I'll ask the driver to pick you up tomorrow morning." "Don't." Ye Rong gently declined. "It's not appropriate for me, a cleaner, to sit in such a luxurious car. Besides, if Xiaosong sees it, I don't know how to tell him." Gu Yanchen saw the concerns in Ye Rong's eyes. He held Ye Rong's hands lovingly. "Okay, when you want to make our relationship public, then make it public. Don't make me wait too long." Ye Rong nodded, watched Gu Yanchen's back and said, "Tell the driver to drive slowly, and send me a message when you get home." "Okay, go in quickly, it's cold at night." Sending Gu Yanchen away, Ye Rong leaned against the door and stroked her still beating heart, her cheeks burning hot. She still couldn't believe that she was 41 years old and married her son's classmate. And the son on the bed was still snoring, sleeping more and more deeply. Gu Yanchen, the heir of Gu International, the world's richest man. Decisive and ruthless, he didn't like women, and many celebrities and rich girls tried their best to climb into his bed. But he married her, a 41-year-old old aunt. I dare not even think about it, but it really happened to me. This matter has to start from one day ago. Chapter 2: Being pressed down by her son's classmate. Gu's International Hotel. Ye Rong is cleaning the last guest room of the day conscientiously and responsibly. She will hand over to her night shift colleague in 20 minutes. Her son Shu Song came back from Yuncheng today. Since her son went to college, he has to balance his studies and work part-time. To be honest, the mother and son have not seen each other for more than a year. She always feels happy when talking about her son, because her son is a top student. He can get a full scholarship, which makes her, who has not graduated from junior high school, extremely proud. It is worth her years of hard work to cultivate such an excellent son. When she was 6 months pregnant with Shu Song, her husband Shu Dahai cheated on her. After she knew about it, she resolutely filed for divorce with her pregnant belly. Shu Dahai agreed to the divorce, but the premise was that Ye Rong must leave the house. Ye Rong agreed without hesitation. For so many years, she has been living with her son alone. It is said that widows are prone to gossip, and she is no exception. When she first returned to her rural hometown, her traditional parents could not stand their daughter getting divorced within a year of marriage. They could not stand the villagers pointing fingers at their family behind their backs, and they were frowning and sighing all day long. Her aunts and uncles repeatedly persuaded her to remarry, but later they found out that her ex-husband had cheated on her, so they stopped persuading her. As time went by, people gradually came to her house to introduce her to potential partners, and some even advised her to leave her son to her ex-husband. In order to protect her son from criticism and for her parents to be able to hold their heads up in the village, she left her rural hometown with her son at night. When she arrived in the city, she rented a bungalow with the only 100 yuan she had left. The small house wrapped the mother and son. No matter how hard or tired she did not plan to remarry. After her first failed marriage, she no longer believed in marriage. She firmly believed that she could raise a good child. She had seen too many examples of stepfathers abusing their children, so she didn't dare to gamble. She would rather suffer a little. She didn't graduate from junior high school and couldn't find a decent job. Later, in order to support her son Shusong to go to school, she worked odd jobs everywhere. She had been working as a cleaner at Gu's for the past 10 years, and finally settled down. Fortunately, Shusong did not disappoint her expectations and was admitted to the highest institution of learning in Yuncheng. Thinking that she would see her son whom she had not seen for a long time, Ye Rong worked more skillfully. Suddenly, a tall and handsome young man in a suit and leather shoes stumbled into the guest room that Ye Rong was cleaning with a dazed look. Interrupted Ye Rong, who was still immersed in the thoughts of reunion. "Hello, sir, the guest room is being cleaned. You need to wait a while before you can check in." Ye Rong held the head of the bed and straightened up with an apologetic smile, her expression sincere. Who knew that the next second, the young man fell straight towards Ye Rong and pressed on her. Ye Rong screamed in shock, "Sir! Sir, sir! 1 million. The man's voice was low and hoarse, as if he was holding back something. "What 1 million? Ye Rong's voice was trembling slightly. 2 million. The young man's breath hit Ye Rong's face hotly. He loosened his tie with difficulty with a hazy look in his eyes. Ye Rong had not recovered from the shock. I heard footsteps outside the guest room. Then came the voice of a woman talking to several men. I clearly saw Gu Yanchen coming in this direction. He was drugged and couldn't run far. Search each room for me." Hearing the voice, Ye Rong clearly felt the body of the young man pressing on her stiffen. It seemed that this group of people came for him. "Miss," the security guard said that he saw Mr. Gu on the second floor. At the tense moment when the door was pushed open, another bodyguard's voice came. "Let's go down quickly." Hearing this, the woman stepped on her exquisite high heels and pressed the elevator button urgently. "Today, we found Mr. Gu, and you will definitely get some benefits." The group followed the woman to the elevator, and the footsteps gradually moved away from the guest room. As the footsteps disappeared, the young man lying on Ye Rong also consciously relaxed. He was flushed, breathing heavily, and sweat flowed down his angular cheeks. 3 million. It was all because of his carelessness that someone took advantage of him. "I'm not the kind of woman you said." Ye Rong's eyes were sharp. "You said that." The next second, both hands were controlled by the young man and gently raised above his head. "I was drugged, help me, 3 million." The young man closed his eyes forbearingly, and his long eyelashes trembled slightly with the rhythm of his speech. 3 million. That was the most money she had ever seen in her life. It was enough for her son to graduate from college. Ye Rong hesitated. Before she could think, the man's hot body temperature pressed down directly, and his thin lips with hot temperature fell on her lips. The man's kiss was gentle and domineering, with a hint of alcohol filling her nose. Before Ye Rong's brain could think more, she felt the aggressive big hand touching her skin. Chapter 3. An accident happened. The strong male scent filled her nose, and through the faint moonlight outside the window, the man's face gradually blurred. Ye Rong half pushed and half succeeded, and her body, which had not been in contact with a man for more than 20 years, was slowly ignited by the young man in front of her. I don't know where the courage came from. She boldly reached out and touched the man's narrow waist, and her weak palm fell on his tight abdomen. The man froze, shocked by her response, and the desire that had retreated seemed to be opened and rushed out. The next second, he leaned over and bit her lips, biting them hard, and grabbed her legs with strong arms. After several times of making love, Ye Rong was immersed in the love between men and women, and gradually lost her mind. Under the dim light, only the soft mattress rose and fell. After the passion. After a night of fatigue, Ye Rong fell asleep slowly and waited for her to wake up again. The young man had already showered and put on a well-tailored high-end suit and stood in front of the French window. Ye Rong had the opportunity to carefully observe the man in front of her, with a thin face, high-end single eyelids, deep ink-like eyes, and thin lips slightly pursed. His high nose bridge and angular jawline outlined the three-dimensionality of his facial contours. She couldn't help but sigh, so handsome. Have you seen enough? The young man interrupted Ye Rong's covetous eyes with a noble mouth. Ye Rong immediately sat up awkwardly, picked up the quilt to block the spring scenery in front of her chest, and said embarrassedly, "Yes, sorry." The young man elegantly fastened his cufflinks and slowly straightened his collar. He took out a black card from his bosom, glanced at Ye Rong on the bed and handed it to her. "This is 3 million, as your reward for last night." Ye Rong stared at the black card, hesitated for a long time, timidly lowered her head and whispered, "I don't plan to ask for money." The young man paused, looked down at Ye Rong. "What do you plan to ask for?" "Nothing," Ye Rong said self-comfortingly. "To be honest, I haven't suffered any loss. I'm so old, it's good that you don't despise me. You and I each get what we need, and you also serve me. We are even, you go." She nervously grabbed the corner of the quilt and looked away with embarrassment. "Although there is a big age difference between the two, after what happened last night, I always feel embarrassed to face the man again." Hearing this, the man was slightly stunned. Service. This word is really wonderful. Each takes what he needs. Is he regarded as a public relations man? What kind of strange brain circuit does this woman have? Can a public relations man take out 3 million? Last night, things happened too suddenly, and he didn't have time to take a good look at the person in front of him. He then carefully looked at Ye Rong's appearance. Her hair was draped over her shoulders, and her face was slightly powdered, revealing just the right softness. Her eyebrows were slender and natural, gently stretched, her eyes were flowing, her lips were light, and she was gentle and intellectual. She exuded an elegant temperament after years of precipitation. She seemed to be older than him, and her appearance was not stunning, but people couldn't help but take a second look. An idea suddenly came to his mind, and he said majestically, "Gu Yanchen." "Ye Rong." She blurted out her name nervously. "I hate owing favors the most in my life." Gu Yanchen said while proudly wearing an expensive limited edition watch. "Since you don't need money, let's get married." "R." Ye Rong said in disbelief, completely frightened. "Is 5 minutes enough to get dressed?" Gu Yanchen glanced at the time on the watch elegantly. "I'll wait for you outside the door. It's 8:30 in the morning. I can get the marriage certificate from the Civil Affairs Bureau at 9 o'clock. Ye Rong thought Gu Yanchen was joking. "Wait." Unexpectedly, Gu Yanchen took out his mobile phone and called his driver in the next second, saying righteously, "Come to Gu's hotel to pick me up. I'm going to get the marriage certificate with my wife now." "Mr. Gu, wait. We don't know each other yet. Is it too hasty to get married?" Ye Rong got out of bed nervously, slipped, and fell face first to the floor. R. Fortunately, Gu Yanchen caught her quickly and didn't let her fall. Through the thin material, Ye Rong could deeply feel Gu Yanchen's warm body temperature, which immediately reminded her of the madness of last night, and her old face flushed. Gu Yanchen immediately put away his phone and wrapped the bed sheet around Ye Rong's body. "Don't you know me well enough? Madam, I know exactly where all the moles on your body are." Gu Yanchen deliberately lowered his voice, and his rough hands caressed Ye Rong's waist mischievously, causing her body to tremble. Ye Rong's face became even redder after being teased, as if stained with blood, and she stuttered when she spoke. I don't mean that. I mean that we just met for the first time and don't know each other well enough." Gu Yanchen stopped joking, nodded in agreement, and introduced himself seriously. "My name is Gu Yanchen, 23 years old, the heir of Gu's International, unmarried." Gu's International? The richest man in the world. 23 years old. Oh my God. The same age as her son. Ye Rong opened her eyes wide in surprise. "I'm 40 years old, in lunar age is 41 years old, divorced, and have a son." Chapter 4, Get married directly with a marriage certificate. 40 years old. I really can't tell. I thought you were in your 30s at most. Gu Yanchen calmly put his coat on Ye Rong's shoulders. He didn't seem surprised that Ye Rong was older than him. But it doesn't matter. I don't mind age. If you want to have a child between you and me in the future, you can have it. If not, your son can take my surname. Mr. Gu. I feel like we don't even know each other yet. Is this too abrupt? Ye Rong felt something was weird. Don't be abrupt. After marriage, we have plenty of time to get to know each other slowly. I have a meeting at 10 o'clock. Gu Yanchen narrowed his eyes and leaned over to stare at Ye Rong. So, madam, can we go get the marriage certificate? Gu Yanchen has a first-class figure, good looks and financial resources, and his kidneys are strong and durable, so it is not impossible for him to get married. But is it too fast? Even after walking out of the Civil Affairs Bureau with the marriage certificate in hand, Ye Rong still couldn't believe that she had married a handsome 23-year-old boy. And he is the richest man in the world. She must be dreaming. Mr. Gu, I still feel that. Ye Rong had an embarrassed expression, feeling something was weird. Still calling me Mr. Gu. Gu Yanchen's tone was 3 parts domineering and 7 parts doting. Call me husband. Gu. Ye Rong was about to speak. Gu Yanchen. A man in casual clothes came into their sight. Is it really you? Following their voice, Ye Rong opened his eyes wide in surprise. Xiao Song. Mom. This person was Shu Song, Ye Rong's top student son whom she had not seen for 2 years. Mom. Gu Yanchen's eyes were full of surprise, but his face soon returned to his usual calmness. Do you know each other? Ye Rong asked tentatively. My elementary school classmate, Gu Yanchen. Shu Song rubbed his hands subconsciously. Long time no see, why are you here at the Civil Affairs Bureau? Get married. Gu Yanchen answered concisely. He never dreamed that the woman he had just married would be the mother of his elementary school classmate. Does this mean he's happy to be a father? Where's the madam? Shu Song looked around, but didn't see any other women except his mother. The madam. Madam left first because of something. Ye Rong interrupted. She hadn't figured out how to explain to her son the unspeakable situation she and Gu Yanchen were in. She was afraid that her son would not be able to accept it for a while, and she felt that she was not worthy of Gu Yanchen. She was also afraid that Gu Yanchen was just acting on impulse. In short, she didn't want to tell her son yet. She and Gu Yanchen got the marriage certificate. Gu Yanchen glanced at Ye Rong, and a hint of displeasure flashed in his eyes. He felt that he was being disliked. And he was despised by the wife he just married. He, Gu Yanchen, is the famous richest man in the world. Is she so embarrassed? She doesn't even dare to admit that she is his wife. Mom, what are you doing here? Shu Song asked curiously. I went to the market to buy your favorite clams. I passed by here and ran into you. Ye Rong made up a lame lie with a nervous look. Then he quickly hid the marriage certificate in his hand behind his back. It seems that he rarely lies. Then you go back first, Mom. This has nothing to do with you. Shu Song glanced at Ye Rong impatiently. But, you just came back, aren't you going home? Ye Rong asked his son cautiously. The mother and son haven't seen each other for more than a year, and she really misses her son. Are you annoying? You told me to go home, but you reek of cleaning staff and didn't even bother to change clothes. I'm an excellent student now. How can I face others if they know that my mother is a cleaning staff? Shu Song said this with a look of disgust and covered his nose with his collar. Chapter 5, Don't mind educating your son in advance. Ye Rong, who was despised by Shu Song, raised her arm awkwardly and sniffed the clothes. She changed her clothes every day, and there was no other smell except the smell of laundry detergent and toilet water. Okay, Mom gets it. Next time I will change my clothes before going out and won't embarrass you. Ye Rong grasped the corner of her clothes and responded gently. Shu Song waved his hand impatiently, and the next second he put his arm around Gu Yanchen's shoulders with a chuckle. We haven't seen each other for more than 10 years. I heard that you started your own company. Let's find a place to have a drink and reminisce about the past. It's a small company with no future. Gu Yanchen glanced at Ye Rong. Gu Yanchen didn't expect that Shu Song, such a top student, would be so disrespectful to his mother. This book has been read to the point of being eaten by dogs. Okay, let's go. Shu Song urged Ye Rong to leave quickly. Don't embarrass me here. We haven't seen each other for a year. Why don't we go back today? Ye Rong advised her son embarrassedly. She could see that her son didn't know that Gu Yanchen was the heir to the world's richest man. Moreover, it seems that the two people are not very familiar with each other. His son's enthusiastic invitation only made Gu Yanchen embarrassed. Xiao Song, Mr. Gu should be very busy, why don't you and mom go home first? Unexpectedly, Gu Yanchen, who was standing beside him, readily agreed, then let's go together. There happens to be a good restaurant nearby. He stared at Ye Rong, waiting for her answer. Why is she going? She is just an uneducated rural woman. As a son, Shu Song stared at Ye Rong with disdain. Forget it, we can just go. Yeah, it's not appropriate for me to go, so I won't go. Ye Rong tried her best to hide her embarrassment because her son disliked her. You also said that you and your son haven't seen each other for a long time. Let's go together. You still have to cook when you go back. Let's go together. The 1.83 meter tall Gu Yanchen lowered his head slightly and spoke softly to the panicked Ye Rong. His elegant and considerate attitude forms a sharp contrast with his son Shu Song. Is that appropriate? Ye Rong looked at his son eagerly, feeling caught in a dilemma. Her son doesn't want her to go, but Gu Yanchen asks her to go. Since Gu Yanchen has spoken, let's go together. Shu Song curled his lips and rolled his eyes at his mother, warning, don't embarrass me later. They came to the most luxurious French-themed restaurant in City B. The luxurious decoration and elegant decorations exuded the smell of money everywhere. Shu Song, who had never seen the world, opened his eyes wide and couldn't help looking around. Like a country bumpkin who just came to the city. Only distinguished VVVVV purple diamond customers can enter such a high-end restaurant. Shu Song never thought that he would have the opportunity to come in one day. Gu Yanchen, you are really successful. Tell me what kind of business you are doing so I can show you around. Shu Song couldn't help but admire. Led by a tall waiter, the three of them sat in the restaurant's best view spot. Looking through the bright floor-to-ceiling glass windows, they could overlook the entire view of Lichun. Gu Yanchen handed the menu to Ye Rong, who was sitting opposite him in a gentlemanly manner. Take a look at what you want to eat. There are Michelin 10-star chefs here. Ye Rong took the menu and subconsciously tucked the loose hair behind her ears. The dense French text on it made her embarrassed. Shu Song snatched the menu from Ye Rong's hand and said, what can she look at? She's a rural woman. Let me look at it. A hint of displeasure flashed across Gu Yanchen's eyes. Ye Rong sensed Gu Yanchen's emotions and immediately comforted him softly, I really don't understand. It's you young people who have to order. I'll eat whatever you want. For Ye Rong's sake, Gu Yanchen pretended to be elegant and picked up the teacup and said softly, it's my treat today, so feel free to order whatever you want. After all, this was his and his new wife's first meal, so it couldn't be too shabby. When Shu Song heard that Gu Yanchen was treating him, his eyes lit up immediately. Waiter, give me one portion of the most expensive and best dishes you have. Can you finish eating it, Xiao Song? Ye Rong stopped him worriedly. Gu Yanchen didn't say anything. Why are you butting in? What do you know? Shu Song rolled his eyes at his mother impatiently. He handed the menu to the waiter with a smile on his face. The waiter looked at Gu Yanchen, and Gu Yanchen signaled with his eyes that it was okay. The waiter then put away the menu and left. Gu Yanchen, what business are you doing now? Take me with you, brother. Shu Song stared at Gu Yanchen flatteringly. He had heard in the elementary school group that Gu Yanchen had a big business and had wanted to contact him for a long time. I didn't expect the opportunity to come so quickly. Small business, or? Gu Yanchen crossed his hands on the dining table. In fact, he was not very familiar with Shu Song. Shu Song was just a classmate of his in countless elementary schools. The reason why he agreed to have dinner with Shu Song was simply because he wanted to bring Ye Rong along. After all, this is the first meal they have had together after getting their marriage certificate. Looking at Shu Song, who was so disrespectful to Ye Rong, the coldness in Gu Yanchen's eyes gradually deepened. If Shu Song went a little further, he wouldn't mind teaching his son a lesson in advance. Chapter 6, First Meal with My New Wife. A sumptuous French meal was neatly placed on the dining table in anticipation. Ye Rong, who had never used cutlery, seemed a little at a loss at the moment. She held the knife and fork tightly in her hands, trying to cut the delicious-looking foie gras. After all the hassle, the foie gras was still intact. His son Shu Song standing next to him was in sharp contrast to Ye Rong. He had no image at all. He was so busy devouring the delicious food that he seemed to have forgotten the existence of his mother. The attentive and considerate Gu Yanchen keenly noticed Ye Rong's predicament. He reached out like a gentleman and took the plate from Ye Rong's hand in front of himself. He picked up the knife gracefully and began to slowly cut the foie gras piece by piece. Every cut was made to the right place, and in a short while, the originally whole foie gras was turned into evenly sliced slices. Then, Gu Yanchen, very gentlemanly, put the cut goose liver back in front of Ye Rong. "Dip it in this sauce, just like me," Gu Yanchen said as he picked up a small piece of goose liver with a fork, gently dipped it in a little of the special sauce in the small dish in front of him, and demonstrated to Ye Rong. Seeing Tu Yanchen being so considerate, Ye Rong couldn't help but feel grateful. She carefully picked up the fork, and imitated Gu Yanchen, picking up a piece of goose liver and slowly putting it into her mouth. However, when the taste of foie gras spreads on the tip of the tongue, she frowned slightly. The taste was indescribable strange. She thought it must be her own problem. She was a wild boar and couldn't eat fine food. She had never been to such a high-end restaurant in her life. If it weren't for my son this time, how could I have the opportunity to come to such a high-end restaurant? Ye Rong ate the French meal very carefully, and every movement was cautious. Firstly, she didn't want to embarrass her son, and more importantly, she didn't want to embarrass Gu Yanchen. After all, the two of them are already married and this concerns Gu Yanchen's reputation. Therefore, she always remains highly vigilant and dares not slack off in the slightest. Are you not used to it? Just as Ye Rong was concentrating on cutting the food on the plate, Gu Yanchen's low and magnetic voice suddenly came to her ears. There was a hint of concern in his tone, which made Ye Rong, who was already a little nervous, feel nervous. Ye Rong quickly shook her head and waved her hands, stammering, "No, no, it's delicious. I love it very much. Really. If it weren't for you, I'm afraid I would never have the chance to come to such a high-end restaurant in my life." Having said that, the honest Ye Rong took another big bite. Although she tried hard to act like she enjoyed the food, the expression of difficulty in swallowing on her face betrayed her. He slowly put down the knife and fork in his hand, elegantly picked up the napkin beside him and gently wiped the corners of his mouth. He whispered, "I'm done eating too. How about we go to a restaurant you usually go to?" He looked at Ye Rong with his eyes as deep as lake water, leaned forward slightly, and invited Ye Rong in a way that was almost a whisper. Perhaps it was because Gu Yanchen was too gentle. Ye Rong, who had not been cared for many years, was stunned when she raised her head and met those eyes. An inexplicable warmth surged into her heart like a tide. Shu Song suddenly raised his voice and shouted, "No! I haven't eaten enough. Where else can she take you? We can just eat here." "Hey, Gu Yanchen, I just happened to have a cooperation project to discuss with you. I recently wrote a super cool code. As long as it works, it will definitely make money in the future." After saying that, he picked up the glass and drank the red wine in it in one gulp, followed by a burp. At this moment, he would never have thought that the red wine he just drank was worth 800,000 yuan. Under the influence of alcohol, he gradually became tipsy. "Then let's go to another place to continue discussing the project." Gu Yanchen suppressed his impatience and tried to respond in a gentle tone. The frugal Ye Rong looked at the huge table of food in front of him and thought it was really a waste. "We ordered so much. It would be a waste if we don't eat it. Let's just eat here. I like it very much. Let's go, we finished eating my favorite food." Gu Yanchen smiled and said, "Let's try your favorite food." After saying that, Ye Rong was gently pulled up from her seat by Gu Yanchen. Gu Yanchen's innate kingly temperament could not be rejected by Ye Rong. Ye Rong could only let Gu Yanchen, who was walking in front of her, lead her. Ye Rong never thought that their seemingly ordinary meal today would cost a total of 1 million. If she knew, she would probably faint from fright on the spot. However, to Gu Yanchen, all this was just an ordinary home-cooked meal. You know, he is the legal heir to the world's richest man. His status and wealth are beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Where are you guys going? Wait for me. Shu Song, who didn't have time to finish his meal, picked up the napkin on the table and quickly wiped his greasy mouth. He hurriedly caught up with Gu Yanchen and his mother. He said with a mean heart, "Don't even think about leaving me to pay the bill." Sitting in Gu Yanchen's high-end business car, Xu Song, who was already a little drunk, muttered a few words from time to time. Gu Yanchen and Ye Rong, who were sitting in the back seat, said nothing and just sat there quietly. The atmosphere in the car was extremely stuffy and tense. Chapter 7. Wouldn't you like to invite your husband upstairs for a cup of tea? The business car stopped in a parking lot not far from the couple's food stall where Ye Rong often came to pack meals. It was evening, and the busy streets were lined with various snack stalls, and the food stall that Ye Rong often visited was even more crowded. The bustling street food stalls are filled with all kinds of people at this time of day. Looking around, every table was occupied by some kind of people. Some are groups of friends gathering together, savoring delicious dishes and drinking wine leisurely. Some people were shouting loudly, joking around, and the place was full of laughter, and the air was filled with the flavor of life everywhere. Sister Rong is here. Would you like to order the same old 3 dishes as usual? The female boss's hearty voice echoed throughout the food stall. With a smile on her face, she warmly invited Ye Rong, her son and Gu Yanchen beside her to take a seat. When will Xiao Song come back? The female boss asked kindly, holding the menu in her hand. Just now. Xu Song glanced at the female boss impatiently. He really looked down on the proprietress who ran a simple stall. After all, in his opinion, he is going to be a big boss in the future. The reason why he can step into the dirty and messy snack street again today is just because of Gu Yanchen's face. However, Ye Rong had a completely different attitude from Xu Song. She pursed her lips with joy and said, "Xiao Song is finally back. Mom is so happy today. Let's order more delicious dishes." As he said this, Ye Rong's eyes sparkled with happiness. Ye Rong has known the boss couple for more than 10 years. Back then, when Xu Song was still young, he would often do his homework obediently at her stall, waiting for Ye Rong to come home from get off work. After so many years, Ye Rong is still very grateful to their boss and his wife for the care and attention they have given to her and her son. They are more like family members than neighbors and friends. Okay, add a few more dishes that Xiao Song likes. The female boss patted Xu Song's shoulder. His gaze turned and fell on Gu Yanchen, who was sitting quietly opposite Xu Song. She had seen all kinds of people, and she could tell at a glance that the man in front of her was extraordinary, with an innate air of nobility emanating from his every move. Not an ordinary person. The female boss couldn't help but ask curiously, "This gentleman looks unfamiliar. Who is he?" Xu Song used disposable chopsticks to pierce the bowl wrapped in plastic wrap. "My classmate, the big boss, has had enough of the delicacies from land and sea and wants to try home-cooked meals, so I brought you here." Hearing this, the smile on the female boss's face became even more intense, and she kept responding, "So that's how it is. Our Xiao Song is still thinking of Auntie, knowing to bring such a distinguished guest to Auntie's place. Auntie must thank you very much. Auntie must give you 2 more dishes." After saying that, she turned around, still with that playful, angry, and impetuous look, and began to enthusiastically order food for other people. Ye Rong and Gu Yanchen looked at each other. Ye Rong had an embarrassed look on his face. It was clear that he didn't want to come just now, but now he insisted that he brought them here. "In the past, my son was obviously not such a hypocritical person." Fortunately, Gu Yanchen didn't take it seriously. Gu Yanchen, who was eating at a roadside stall for the first time, imitated Xu Song's actions exactly and carefully used chopsticks to pierce open the disposable plastic wrap bowl in front of him. Then he gently broke the disposable chopsticks in half, scraped the rough edges of the disposable chopsticks, picked up a small piece of the side dish on the table, put it into his mouth and chewed it slowly. Surprisingly, this seemingly ugly side dish had just the right salty taste and a refreshing and delicious texture when eaten. It was not at all as difficult to swallow as he had imagined. Gu Yanchen nodded slightly and commented with satisfaction, "Well, this tastes really good." Seeing him so supportive, Ye Rong was so happy that she couldn't stop smiling. In his hand, Ye Rong was peeling the century egg peanuts that Xu Song had loved to eat since he was a child. The peanut skins looked like they were moldy. Ye Rong peeled them one by one and put them into Xu Song's bowl. "What is that in your hand?" Gu Yanchen, who had just drunk red wine in the romantic French restaurant, was now a little tipsy. His eyes, which were originally deep and sharp, now revealed a bit of childish innocence and desire. He stared straight at the peanuts in Ye Rong's hand and asked in an almost coquettish tone, "Don't I have a share?" It's strange to say, for some reason, when he saw Ye Rong busy peeling peanuts for Shusong beside him, he felt like a pot of mixed feelings had been overturned in his heart. All kinds of feelings surged into his mind. In short, he was particularly unhappy. Why should Shusong be the only one to enjoy this treatment? He would not agree. He must also have it, it must be fair. Ye Rong couldn't help but smile after hearing this, and explained softly, "This is called preserved egg peanuts, and it's not a rare thing. But its taste is very special, and some people think it's weird. Xiaosong has liked this since he was a child. Are you sure you want to try it?" Gu Yanchen nodded without hesitation, his eyes firm, and he said, "Yes." Seeing this, Ye Rong reached out and grabbed a few preserved egg peanuts, and gently and carefully put them into the bowl in front of Gu Yanchen. But this still did not meet Gu Yanchen's requirements, and he just widened his innocent big eyes. He glanced at his hands covered in disposable gloves and muttered with difficulty, "Oh, this is troublesome. My hands are dirty and I can't even take the peanuts from the bowl." As he spoke, he even deliberately shook his two hands wearing disposable gloves, signaling to Ye Rong. Seeing this, Ye Rong understood what he meant and immediately said softly, "Well, let me help you." After saying that, she reached out her hand, picked up a preserved egg and peanut, and slowly fed it to Gu Yanchen's mouth. Gu Yanchen, who received the same treatment as Shusong, was secretly delighted, with a barely perceptible hint of pride in his eyes. He opened his mouth slightly and gently bit the preserved egg and peanut. As his teeth touched, a strange smell instantly spread. As a result, the pungent smell rushed straight to Gu Yanchen's head like a flood and rushed into his nasal cavity, causing him to cough involuntarily. Cough, 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 cough. Ye Rong walked behind him anxiously and patted his back gently. "Drink some water. This tastes a bit choking. Drink some water to calm down." Gu Yanchen, however, suppressed his discomfort and replied calmly, I'm fine, I'm fine." Sure enough, all foods that look weird on the outside also taste weird. After 3 rounds of drinking, Shusong's face turned red and he hooked his arm around Gu Yanchen's shoulders. He kept muttering about his plans and beautiful visions for the future, as if their whole world was about to be under his feet. He spoke eloquently and non-stop, "Brother, Lechin will be my world from now on. I will become a big boss with billions of wealth in the future, so that everyone will look at me with new eyes." Ye Rong sat quietly by the side, listening silently to the grand blueprints from his son's mouth. Her eyes were full of fascination and admiration. Although she did not fully understand many of the words, she knew deeply that these were her son's truest dreams deep in his heart. Gu Yanchen rested his chin on his hand, casually playing with the wine glass in his hand, and occasionally glanced at Ye Rong to see her reaction. As the night grew deeper, this sudden drinking party finally came to an end. Shusong was already drunk and unconscious. Seeing this, Gu Yanchen, who was still sober, hurriedly stood up to support the drunk Shusong and prepared to take them home together. A commercial vehicle was parked in front of the alley in an old residential area. The narrow corridor was barely wide enough for people to pass through on foot. Gu Yanchen supported the staggering Shusong all the way and finally arrived at the door of Ye Rong's unit. "Thank you so much for sending Xiaosong back," Ye Rong said with gratitude and was about to take his son from Gu Yanchen. Gu Yanchen looked at Ye Rong with a burning gaze, his mouth slightly raised, revealing a faint smile. "Would you like me to come up and have a cup of tea?" Gu Yanchen's voice was low and magnetic, with an unquestionable firmness. Clam? Chapter 8 Didn't tea they just? My home is simple, and I don't have any good tea to treat you. Ye Rong's face was full of embarrassment, and he rubbed his hands awkwardly and said, "I'm so sorry." She lowered her head, as if she felt that she was too shabby and made the other party laugh at her. "It's okay to get to know my wife's family, right?" Gu Yanchen said with a smile, his tone very gentle. Before he finished speaking, he didn't give Ye Rong any chance to refute, and he carried Shusong's heavy arm on his broad shoulders. "Which floor?" Gu Yanchen turned and looked at Ye Rong and asked. Sixth floor. It's a bit high, and some of the lights in the corridor are broken. You have to be careful when you walk." Ye Rong replied hurriedly. As he spoke, he quickly followed Gu Yanchen's steps, fearing that they would both accidentally fall. Finally entering the door, Gu Yanchen carefully helped Shusong into the bedroom and put him on the only single bed in the house. Looking at Shusong lying quietly on the bed, Gu Yanchen breathed a sigh of relief, then turned around and slowly walked towards the living room. Standing in the middle of the living room, Gu Yanchen looked around carefully. Ye Rong really didn't lie, his home was indeed very simple, and could be described as bare. There was no other decent furniture in the living room except a shabby sofa, a small coffee table and an old TV. Slightly yellowed walls and simple cement floors. Although the whole room is simply furnished, it is kept exceptionally tidy and clean, giving people a warm and comfortable feeling. The few pieces of furniture are spotless, and there are various green plants planted on the balcony. It is trimmed in an orderly manner, green and full of vitality. It can be seen that the owner of the house is very fond of cleanliness. Gu Yanchen stood quietly in the living room, his eyes falling on the busy figure through their half-open kitchen door. Under the dim and soft light, Ye Rong held the kettle and skillfully made tea. This warm scene caused ripples in Gu Yanchen's heart for no apparent reason. Ye Rong wiped the moisture off her hands with a dry towel, then slowly walked to Gu Yanchen with a kettle and a teacup. She gently placed it on the coffee table. She said shyly, "I'm sorry, we don't have any good tea at home. You may not be used to it, but don't worry, the cups are all new, I washed them more than 10 times, they are very clean." She looked at Gu Yanchen nervously, fearing that Gu Yanchen, who came from a noble family, would despise her. She kept emphasizing cleanliness, as if apart from cleanliness, she really had nothing else to show for it. Gu Yanchen smiled slightly, as if bathed in a spring breeze. He reached out and picked up the teacup, lowered his eyes, gently sniffed the tea, slowly moved closer to the cup, and praised softly, "Well, not bad." Hearing these words, Ye Rong's originally tense heart instantly relaxed. At this moment, Shu Song's roar suddenly came from the room, which was originally full of ambiguous atmosphere. Shu Song was drunk and mumbling incoherently, "Keep drinking." "No, no, absolutely not, I have to drink this glass of wine no matter what, I have to accompany you, Mr. Gu." Ye Rong was the first to open the bedroom door to check on her son. She said worriedly, "Xiao Song." As soon as she finished speaking, Shu Song, who had managed to sit up, fell heavily back onto the bed with a thump. He kept muttering, "Come on." Seeing this, Ye Rong hurriedly bent down to pick up the sheet that had fallen on the ground and carefully covered Shu Song again. Just as she turned around, she suddenly bumped into Gu Yanchen's strong and hot chest behind her. "R!" Ye Rong couldn't help but scream out in surprise. She was suddenly at a loss for words. She quickly turned her head and nervously checked whether her son on the bed was awakened by her screams. Fortunately, my son on the bed didn't move at all and showed no sign of waking up. After calming himself down a bit, Ye Rong slowly turned around. When she raised her eyes, she met Gu Yanchen's deep and burning eyes. For a moment, the air between the two seemed to freeze, and an indescribable subtle feeling quietly spread between each other's hearts. Then Gu Yanchen lowered his head with an ambiguous look in his eyes. His tall body was like a mountain. He trapped the petite girl tightly between the end of the bed and his hot chest. In the small space, even the air became extremely thin. She didn't even dare to breathe, for fear of disturbing her sleeping son. At this moment, her heart was pounding, and a terrible thought involuntarily emerged in her mind: is Gu Yanchen planning to do something here? But weren't they just this morning? Thinking of this, her cheeks instantly turned red. She whispered coquettishly, don't do it in front of our son." However, in the face of her pleading, Gu Yanchen deliberately remained silent and just held her down tightly with his strong arms. That's right, just now, when he was standing in the living room looking at the busy figure in the kitchen, an irresistible impulse surged into his heart like a tide, and a certain part of his body responded quickly. The next moment, he jumped, his hands an exerted force, domineeringly and gently picked up Ye Rong's body and held it firmly in his broad and warm arms. He spoke in a deep voice with a domineering and affectionate tone, "Then let's go home." Ye Rong, whose feet suddenly left the ground, hugged Gu Yanchen's neck in panic. "Quick, put me down." Gu Yanchen just uttered a soft, "Hush," and gestured to her with a threatening look in his eyes to look at his sleeping son. His warm and pleasant breath was gently blowing on Ye Rong's cheek, bringing a tingling sensation. Thinking of waking up her son, Ye Rong immediately stopped struggling and prayed secretly in her heart that Gu Yanchen would not really do anything out of line. She begged again timidly, "I won't move, then put me down quickly." Although Gu Yanchen was reluctant and still wanted to do more, he still listened to Ye Rong's words and gently put the person in his arms down. He looked at Ye Rong tenderly and said softly, "Okay, I'll listen to you, madam." Then he slowly turned around and walked towards the door. After walking only a few steps, Gu Yanchen seemed to suddenly remember something, and then turned around to face Ye Rong behind him, leaning elegantly against the door frame. His deep and charming eyes were full of doting, and the corners of his mouth slightly raised with a sly smile, and he said, "Since I am so obedient, shouldn't madam give me a little reward?" Hearing this, Ye Rong was stunned and a confused look appeared on his face. Before she could react, she saw Gu Yanchen lower his proud head slightly and approach her quickly. The next moment, his soft and warm lips gently pressed against Ye Rong's red lips. This kiss was as light and brief as a dragonfly touching the water, and as fleeting as a flash of light. Ye Rong had never expected Gu Yanchen to do this. Her cheeks immediately turned red. She lowered her head shyly and said in a low voice, "Don't do this next time." "That means it's okay this time." Gu Yanchen smiled slyly, then leaned down again, not giving Ye Rong any chance to react. This time, he did not just taste it briefly like before, but held Ye Rong's fair cheeks with both hands and kissed her deeply. The kiss became increasingly passionate and deep, and Ye Rong felt as if she was drowning in this deep affection and unable to extricate herself. Finally, when Ye Rong was out of breath and about to suffocate, Gu Yanchen finally released his hand that had been tightly holding the back of her head. He took a step back and stared at Ye Rong's face with burning eyes, which looked even more charming because of her shyness and excitement. He stretched out his fingers and gently straightened her collar, which he had messed up, and said solemnly, "Have a good rest. I'll ask the driver to pick you up tomorrow morning." "Don't." Ye Rong hurriedly shook her head nervously. "It's not appropriate for a cleaner like me to ride in your car. What if Xiaosong sees us? I don't know how to tell him." As he spoke, Ye Rong bit his lips unconsciously, revealing a look of worry. Gu Yanchen naturally saw Ye Rong's concerns about making their relationship public. So he slowly reached out and gently held Ye Rong's slightly rough hands. She said softly, "It's up to you then. You can make our relationship public when you want to. Don't make me wait too long." He gently took Ye Rong's hand, slowly moved it to his lips, and gave her a light kiss. Ye Rong nodded and watched Gu Yanchen leave. She couldn't help but reach out and touch her pounding heart, secretly thinking about this sudden and dramatic relationship with Gu Yanchen. Faced with this unexpected relationship, she felt a little confused and overwhelmed, and completely unsure. Chapter 9 Money Money Money. Gu Yanchen loosened the buttons on his collar and walked down the stairs step by step. The dim light from the staircase flickered, reflecting on his resolute and knife-like face. He is a man of few desires. He can always remain calm and restrained in the face of worldly desires and emotions. He thought he must have abstained from sex for too long. That's why I would do that to Ye Rong. This is not like him. It's really not like him. But facing Ye Rong, who was both easy to bully and soft, he couldn't help but want to tease her, and he couldn't stop teasing her. This strange way of doing things is totally unlike his usual style. He is really hungry. Gu Yanchen returned to Xingye Villa. Under the luxurious crystal chandelier, Gu Yanchen half leaned elegantly on the back of the sofa. Her eyes were deep, her thin lips slightly pursed to reveal an imperceptible mysterious smile, and her bony fingers were holding an expensive red wine glass. The deep red liquid in the cup rippled with a charming luster as he shook it slightly. He looked at the brightly lit night scene of City B outside the huge floor-to-ceiling window with a relaxed expression. The next morning, Shusong woke up from a hangover. He rubbed his painful brows and felt the dryness and stinging in his throat. He staggered out of the bedroom. He found that his mother Ye Rong had already prepared breakfast and was waiting for him quietly. "Do you have a headache? Mom made a hangover soup. It's been there for a while and may be a little cold. Mom will heat it up for you now," Ye Rong said as she hurriedly turned around and walked back into the kitchen. In fact, this bowl of hangover soup had been heated up twice by Shusong before he woke up. Shusong put on a short-sleeved t-shirt, stretched himself, yawned loudly, and then leaned lazily against the kitchen door frame. He mumbled sleepily, "Oh, don't bother. I'll just go out and find something to eat later. Where's the money? Give it to me." "Money?" Ye Rong, who was holding a rice shovel in his hand, looked embarrassed. Seeing his mother's reaction, Shusong was immediately furious. He shouted, "What? You're not prepared. What do you do for a living?" "Over the years, I've been responsible for everything at home. You can't help at all. You keep saying that you're doing this for my own good, but now you can't even come up with this little money. Without a house and a car, how can I marry Lian Na? Her family is the richest in Yuncheng. If she knew that I not only have no money, but also have a mother who is a cleaner, how could she agree to be with me? That's right. This time Shu Song rushed home from school specifically for one purpose, to ask Ye Rong for money, and then use it to please the rich girl. Facing her son's scolding and questioning, Ye Rong's face turned very ugly. She explained with difficulty, "Son, it's not that I don't want to help you, but I really don't have that much money now." Shu Song's tone gradually softened, and he said softly, "Mom, haven't you always hoped that I could get married and have children soon? So we must be willing to invest. As long as we succeed in getting married, I, your son, will be able to rise to prominence in no time. When the time comes, you can also enjoy the happiness with me." Ye Rong naturally understood this logic and also hoped that her son could find a good wife, but she really hadn't saved much money over the years. Shu Song asked impatiently, "How much money do you have?" Ye Rong hesitated, but finally slowly took out all the savings she had accumulated over the years from her apron pocket and carefully handed them to Shu Song. She said in a deep voice, "That's all I can say. Of course, I hope you can get married and start a family soon. If Xie Song can live a good life, I, as a mother, will be satisfied. It's all my fault that I'm incompetent and haven't been able to help you in all these years." In fact, for so many years, Ye Rong's part-time work had been used to support Shu Song's food, clothing and other expenses, but for Shu Song, all of this was taken for granted. "Give it to me." Shu Song snatched the bank card from Ye Rong's hand, turned around and left without looking back, saying, "I'm leaving, you don't have to bring me dinner." Looking at Shu Song's receding back, Ye Rong couldn't help but said, "Why don't you finish your breakfast before leaving?" However, the only response she got was a figure gradually disappearing from her sight. Ye Rong sighed helplessly and silently put the things on the table away. I rode on the old electric bike and slowly drove towards the hotel. Along the way, she felt extremely heavy-hearted, and the scene of her conversation with her son in the morning kept appearing in her mind. Alas! It's all my fault for being so incompetent. I had just arrived at the hotel and hadn't had time to catch my breath when the department head announced something big. In the afternoon, the head office will solemnly receive distinguished guests from the United States to discuss a major project involving hundreds of millions of yuan in funds. The new and prestigious president of GU Group, who has just taken office, will personally stay at the hotel to discuss the project. The presence of the president of the headquarters will undoubtedly be an extremely severe test for the hotel. If there is any mistake, you will lose your job. Therefore, after receiving the news, all employees in the hotel from top to bottom were on high alert as if facing a great enemy. Everyone secretly vowed in their hearts to complete this crucial reception mission successfully. Time passed by minute, and it was time to welcome the distinguished guests. I saw a number of luxuriously decorated high-end business cars slowly approaching the hotel gate and stopping steadily. The first thing that caught my eye was a black car. After the door opened, a man with neat short hair and green eyes walked out gracefully from the car. Immediately afterwards, another more dazzling Maybach also parked smoothly on the side and the door was slowly opened. Gu Yanchen raised his chin proudly and walked out of the car in a dignified manner, exuding an innate kingly temperament. Amid the flashing of candleless spotlights and the crowds of onlookers, Gu Yanchen walked side by side with the short-haired, blue-eyed man who had gotten off the car earlier, and walked towards the hotel together. They were followed closely by a group of well-trained assistants, bodyguards and professional translators, and they marched into the spacious and bright conference room in a mighty procession. As soon as they entered the meeting room, Gu Yanchen, speaking fluent and authentic English, started a discussion with the short-haired man in this extremely luxuriously decorated meeting room, expressing their opinions on the cooperation between the two parties. The negotiation site was filled with a tense and depressing atmosphere, and the smooth progress that was originally expected did not occur. The debate between the representatives of both sides became increasingly intense, and the words were full of gunpowder. The entire conference room seemed like a fierce conflict would break out at any time. At this tense moment, the experienced and tactful hotel manager keenly realized that the situation was deteriorating. He knew very well that some measures needed to be taken to ease the tense atmosphere, so he signaled his men to quickly serve tea and water. After a while, a petite figure appeared at the door of the conference room. It was Ye Rong, wearing an assistant uniform. She was carefully carrying a tray with exquisite teacups and teapots on it. Everyone in the conference room held their breath. Ye Rong lowered his head slightly, not daring to look straight ahead. His steps seemed a little unsteady and he walked cautiously past the long line of employees. Everyone's eyes were focused on her, and they seemed to be able to sense her inner uneasiness and fear. At this moment, everyone in the conference room held their breath unconsciously, and everyone was secretly guessing what might happen next. Finally, Ye Rong walked in front of Gu Yanchen, who was in the C position. To everyone's surprise, the sullen and gloomy Gu Yanchen did not lose his temper this time for the first time in his life. He patiently stretched out his hand, steadily took the teacup handed to him by Ye Rong, and gently sniffed the tea fragrance at his lips. Then he put down the teacup and glanced sharply at the people sitting opposite him. In an unquestionable and domineering tone, he said, "If Mr. Charles is still not satisfied with the conditions offered by GU, then there is no need to continue discussing this cooperation." His voice was deep and powerful, echoing throughout the conference room and making people tremble. Faced with Gu Yanchen's tough attitude, the short-haired man on the other side could no longer sit still. He stood up suddenly, propped his hands on the table, and shouted excitedly, "We came here with full sincerity. It has been clearly stated in the contract before that we are only willing to accept Gu's purchase of 70% of our shares. After my manager conducted a comprehensive and in-depth re-evaluation of your company, the final conclusion is that our GU group must account for 80% of the market share." Gu Yanchen sat there, his expression as calm as water. It seemed as if this was just a normal thing, but his firm tone left no room for doubt. "That means there is no room for negotiation." The short-haired man widened his eyes, his face flushed red, and asked angrily. He stood up suddenly and was about to leave the meeting room, but when he turned around, he bumped into Ye Rong, who was standing next to him with a pot of boiling tea. With a crisp splash sound, the teapot was knocked over and the boiling hot water instantly splashed all over Ye Rong's hands and body. Ye Rong also fell to the ground because he lost his balance, and the teapot fell to the ground and broke into pieces. "Are you blind? Get out of my way right now." The short-haired man didn't feel sorry for bumping into someone. Instead, he shouted insults at Ye Rong in an arrogant manner. Gu Yanchen's expression, which had been relatively calm, suddenly darkened, and a hint of anger flashed in his eyes. He ordered the two bodyguards beside him without hesitation, "Stop him." Then he quickly squatted down and carefully checked Ye Rong's injuries, his face full of concern. His voice was exceptionally gentle. "How are you? Are you okay? Are you hurt anywhere?" Ye Rong endured the burn on her hand, covered the injured part tightly with her other hand, shook her head and said softly, "No. It's okay, it's all my fault for not standing properly." She thought that she had caused a big trouble, which was why Gu Yanchen was furious, and she tried hard to force a smile. Chapter 10, Hundreds of billions of projects are gone. Gu Yanchen helped Ye Rong up with a stern expression, then turned to face the short-haired man, his eyes as sharp as a knife, and coldly ordered, "Apologize to her." The short-haired man didn't care. Instead, he raised his chin and glanced at the bodyguards surrounding him with an extremely contemptuous look. He said disdainfully, "You are just a small assistant, and you deserve my apology. Is this what you call hospitality at GU International? It's really eye-opening." At this time, the smooth-talking hotel manager hurriedly stepped forward to smooth things over, saying with a big smile on his face, "Har har, everyone calm down, it's all a misunderstanding, it's all a misunderstanding, don't take it to heart, we will have to cooperate more in the future, don't hurt the harmony between us because of this little thing." Gu Yanchen looked stern and said contemptuously, "Cooperation? Is he worthy? The person who hit me and was so arrogant and domineering is not worthy of cooperating with my Gus. Notice that all cooperation projects with Charles' company will be terminated. In addition, all companies in this industry that still have a cooperative relationship with Charles' company will be permanently cut off from Gus from now on." Hearing this, the short-haired man who had been arrogant and domineering instantly wilted like an eggplant hit by frost, and his face turned extremely pale. He widened his eyes and looked at the intimidating man in front of him in disbelief. "I never thought that it was just because I accidentally knocked down a seemingly insignificant assistant. It actually caused such serious consequences. The entire industry is banning him. This is simply going to completely ruin his future." At this moment, his arrogance has completely disappeared. He grabbed Gu Yanchen's exquisitely tailored sleeves tightly as if he was grasping a life-saving straw, his face full of fear and regret. She begged for mercy in a trembling voice, yes, I'm sorry, President Gu. It's all my fault. It's really my fault. Please be magnanimous and forgive me this time. I solemnly apologized to her. Then, he turned to face Ye Rong and said earnestly, I sincerely apologize to you. I was too reckless just now. Then he looked at Gu Yanchen and said, please give me another chance, okay? Even if the condition is 90%, we will agree. Faced with his urgent pleading, Gu Yanchen simply slightly frowned his eyebrows that were as sharp as swords. His eyes were cold and his tone was overbearing. It's too late. Kick this person out of the hotel immediately and notify all hotels in Licheng not to accommodate this person. Anyone who disobeys orders is against our Gu family. Following Gu Yanchen's order, the bodyguards who were on high alert roughly lifted up the short-haired man who was still begging for mercy. Like dragging a dead dog, he was dragged towards the hotel gate. The man struggled desperately along the way, shouting, no, please let me go. But it's all a foregone conclusion. In the end, he was ruthlessly dragged out of the hotel in full view of everyone. At this moment, there was a dead silence in the conference room. Everyone present held their breath, not even daring to breathe. They all looked pale, with cold sweat on their foreheads, and their hearts were filled with fear and awe. After all, everyone had heard of the reputation of the new president, Gu Yanchen. He was decisive and ruthless, and never showed mercy to his enemies. What I saw with my own eyes today was truly horrifying. The hotel staff were even more silent, lowering their heads silently, fearing that any carelessness would attract Gu Yanchen's attention. Some people are so nervous that they even breathe carefully, as if even the slightest bit of stress would bring disaster to themselves. An important project meeting involving hundreds of billions of dollars that was supposed to proceed smoothly had to end hastily because of this sudden change. Ye Rong, who was called in urgently to help out, quietly returned to the locker room, changed out of his ill-fitting assistant uniform, and put on his usual cleaning uniform again. While sorting her clothes, she recalled the scenes that had just happened. As the lowest-ranking cleaner in the hotel, under normal circumstances, she was not qualified to step into that solemn and dignified meeting room, let alone go in and serve tea and water to the bigwigs inside. However, things are unpredictable. The assistant's child suddenly had a stomachache, and then developed a high fever, and was rushed to the hospital. For a while, no one was willing to take on this hot potato task. Just when everyone was blaming each other and no one wanted to go, the hotel manager called Ye Rong, the most honest person in the hotel, and asked her to temporarily replace the assistant in serving tea. The worst-case scenario is that Ye Rong is fired, but they are all safe and sound. Thinking back to what happened in the conference room today, especially when Gu Yanchen got angry and looked so ferocious as if he wanted to eat someone, she still felt a lingering fear. She couldn't understand why Gu Yanchen, who was always calm and composed, suddenly got so angry. Could it be because he saw her hand scalded by hot water? Thinking of this, she couldn't help but smile at herself. He shook his head quickly, trying to get rid of this ridiculous idea from his mind. After all, she knew very well in her heart that her marriage with Gu Yanchen was purely an accident. For Gu Yanchen, he treated her simply out of a sense of responsibility. What is she thinking about? Besides, she is already in her 40s and shouldn't he have such unrealistic fantasies? Is it possible that she fantasized that Gu Yanchen will be attracted to her? Just as she was immersed in her thoughts, she suddenly heard the chattering of two young female cleaners outside the dressing room. Oh my, President Gu looks so handsome today. I really hope to marry a man like him who is both charming and manly. Another girl also echoed, that's right, and I heard that Mr. Gu is single, an absolutely outstanding single noble. Hearing this, the girl who had spoken earliest eyes suddenly lit up, and she said excitedly, so, doesn't that mean we all still have a chance? He. As she spoke, she walked to the mirror in front of the changing room and began to pose coquettishly, as if she had already seen the moment when she successfully flew onto the tree branch and turned into a phoenix. At this moment, these words full of praise for Gu Yanchen reached Ye Rong's ears while she was hiding in the dressing room without missing a word. She couldn't help but raise the corners of her mouth slightly, revealing a faint smile. Because this extremely outstanding man that those girls praised so much is now her legal husband. She touched her pounding heart. It was incredible to think about it. It was lunchtime and the company's employees went to the restaurant to enjoy lunch. Ye Rong was hiding alone in the stairwell, holding a cheap box lunch in his hand and eating it slowly. Since she had given all her money to her son Shusong before, now she can only try her best to save money. Gu Yanchen, who was about to leave the hotel, happened to pass by here. He glanced at it inadvertently and noticed this scene. His expression suddenly darkened. He turned to look at the hotel manager, who was following closely behind him, and asked in a cold tone, "Don't the hotel's cleaning staff even have working meals?" When the obese hotel manager heard this, he suddenly looked a little uneasy. He was startled for a moment, then he stammered to explain, originally there was, but later, because the hotel wanted to adjust its business direction, the cleaning staff's working meals were cancelled." As he spoke, his eyes flickered and he didn't dare to look Gu Yanchen in the eye. Gu Yanchen stared at Ye Rong in the stairwell through the half-open door with an expressionless face without disturbing her. He slowly put his hands into his trouser pockets and said seriously, "From today on, we will resume providing free meals to all cleaning staff, and they will be provided according to the standards of hotel assistants." The hotel manager nodded hurriedly in agreement, beads of sweat already appearing on his forehead. He hurriedly took out a handkerchief to wipe his few hairs that were already soaked with sweat, and at the same time he quickened his pace, panting, and followed Gu Yanchen closely. He was afraid that if he answered incorrectly, he would anger Gu Yanchen, who was like a living devil, and that all his efforts of more than 20 years would go to waste. The good news of improved cleaning staff remuneration quickly spread throughout the cleaning department. Upon hearing the good news, the employees were extremely excited and cheered. Everyone hugged each other to celebrate, with joy that was difficult to conceal on their faces. Some people even couldn't wait to call their relatives and friends, telling them that those who were unemployed should come to Gu's hotel to apply for cleaning jobs. Ye Rong, who was completely immersed in this sudden joy, had no idea that all this improvement in treatment was related to her. Chapter 11: Flirting with her. 2 weeks later. It was quiet at the airport outside Licheng in the early morning. A flight returning from Greenland slowly landed, breaking the silence of the night sky. The cabin door opened, and Gu Yanchen, tall and stern-looking, walked out of the cabin with steady steps. After a long flight and 2 weeks of tight meeting schedule, he looked a little tired. But those deep eyes still reveal sharpness and determination. At this moment, outside the airport, the wide asphalt road was like a sleeping dragon, extending to invisible places in the dark night. Occasionally a car would speed by, leaving behind a trail of cold exhaust fumes. The lean and capable assistant Xiao Lin quickened his pace and followed closely behind Gu Yanchen, who had 1.8-meter tall slender legs. He walked hurriedly, and nothing around him attracted his attention at all. At the airport gate, a black Bentley sedan was already waiting there, and the driver Xiao Liu was standing respectfully beside the car. Seeing his boss Gu Yanchen from afar, he quickly stepped forward, opened the car door, and greeted his boss. Gu Yanchen walked to the front of the car with an expressionless face, his stern face looking even more angular under the light of the street lamp. As the cold wind blew, he couldn't help but pull his windbreaker closer, then he moved gracefully and swiftly and straddled the spacious back seat. "Are we going back to the villa, boss?" Xiao Liu carefully observed Gu Yanchen through the rearview mirror in the car and asked softly. "Go to number 23 Gonti Street." Gu Yanchen closed his eyes after he finished speaking. He was still suffering from jet lag and leaned back in his chair exhausted. He pressed the power button of the phone in his hand and the screen went off instantly. Xiao Liu understood what he meant. Of course he knew the residential area where the boss's wife lived at number 23 Gonti Street. He didn't dare say anything more. He silently started the car, adjusted the navigation, and drove towards his destination. 2 whole weeks have passed, and his newlywed wife Ye Rong has never called him even once. He, who was usually calm, felt inexplicably irritated. "Ever since I accidentally met Ye Rong, who was eating a box lunch at the door of the hotel that day, I haven't had any contact with her." Although Gu Yanchen tried his best to admit it in his heart, the fact is that he did miss Ye Rong a little. During the 2 weeks in Greenland, Ye Rong's soft figure that night would appear in his mind from time to time, making him irritable and uneasy. Although he was drugged and his consciousness was blurred on the night of the accident, the harmony between body and soul cannot be deceived. There was even a moment when he felt that he had been waiting for so many years just for such a person to appear. But it was only for a moment. But it is undeniable that after so many business trips, he felt the urge to go home for the first time. He attributed the inexplicable emotions in his heart to his obsession with her body. The luxurious black Bentley was parked steadily at number 23 Gonti Street. Most of the people living in the old and dilapidated neighborhoods are elderly people, and they are all asleep at this time. It was late at night and the place was quiet. Looking around, there was not a single light coming through the windows of the entire community, nor was there a single street lamp emitting any light. There was only silence and darkness all around. The window of Ye Rong, who lived on the 6th floor, was also dark. Madam should have rested. Assistant Kobayashi reminded considerately. Gu Yanchen, who was sitting in the back seat of the car, tilted his head slightly and looked in the direction Xiaolin pointed. After looking at the lighted window, his eyes became colder, but the corners of his mouth rose slightly unconsciously. It seemed that there was an indescribable emotion surging in my heart. After a moment's silence, he slowly lowered the car window. The night wind blew his hair, making his stern face look even more angular. Go back to the villa. Gu Yanchen's voice was low and magnetic, with an unquestionable majesty. Hearing this, Xiao Liu, the driver sitting in the driver's seat, quickly responded in a low voice, "Okay, boss." Then, the car window slowly rose again, completely isolating the noise from the outside world from the quietness inside the car. The air conditioner in the car was whirring, and the cold wind kept blowing on Gu Yanchen's face, but his heart gradually calmed down. For some reason, just taking a look made him feel at ease. The next afternoon, after get off work, Ye Rong punched out of get off work as usual, walked out the door and headed to the parking lot to pick up his electric scooter. Just as she was about to reach the parking lot, a red luxury Cayenne suddenly stopped in front of her, blocking her way. Ye Rong didn't take it seriously and immediately raised his foot to avoid the luxury car. At this moment, the window of the luxury car slowly lowered, and a familiar face came into her sight. It was Gu Yanchen. He was sitting in the driver's seat, his hands lazily resting on the steering wheel. Get in the car. Mr. Gu. Ye Rong crouched down and looked at the person sitting in the car in surprise. The two of them hadn't been in touch for almost 2 weeks. If Gu Yanchen hadn't appeared, she would have almost forgotten about her marriage to Gu Yanchen. When Gu Yanchen heard Ye Rong's address to him, a barely perceptible hint of disappointment flashed across his eyes. But he soon returned to normal, with the corners of his mouth slightly raised, sketching a bright smile and saying, "Get in the car." I couldn't help but wonder in my heart, we have already obtained the marriage certificate, but he still calls me Mr. Gu in a strange way. It seems that as a husband, he has indeed been somewhat negligent and needs to make more time to pick up and drop off his wife to and from get off work in the future. Ye Rong stood there, hesitated for a moment, and finally sat in the passenger seat. After sitting in the passenger seat, she started to get nervous. It was the first time in her life that she had ridden in such a luxurious and high-end car. Especially with such a handsome and elegant man sitting next to her, she felt nervous and uneasy. But the more tense it got, the more Gu Yanchen seemed to want to push the tense atmosphere to the extreme. He patted his strong chest gently and gave Ye Rong a suggestive look. Ye Rong stared with her big watery eyes, her expression flickering with doubt. She frowned slightly, not understanding what Gu Yanchen meant. But out of trust and obedience to him, she still obediently moved her head slowly towards Gu Yanchen's chest. As the two people got closer, a familiar smell of floral water instantly penetrated Gu Yanchen's nostrils. The crazy night in the hotel that day immediately came to my mind. He thought that Ye Rong might have misunderstood what he meant. But this accident still made him feel quite satisfied. Gu Yanchen tried to suppress his laughter and said jokingly, "Madam, you are so impatient after not seeing each other for 2 weeks. Do you want to be in the car?" Hearing Gu Yanchen's teasing words, Ye Rong was stunned at first, then he realized that he seemed to have misunderstood the other party's meaning, and he was immediately embarrassed. Her face turned red because of Gu Yanchen's ambiguous teasing words. She hurriedly shrank back into the passenger seat, muttering, I'm sorry, I thought. Oh, it's so embarrassing." At this moment, Ye Rong wanted to find a hole in the ground to crawl into. She felt that her proactive behavior just now was really shameful. How would Gu Yanchen view him? He would definitely regard her as a frivolous, dissolute woman who could be slept with by anyone. When Ye Rong thought of this, he felt very upset. "What do you think?" Gu Yanchen deliberately stared at Ye Rong, whose face was already flushed, with an ambiguous look. Then he turned sideways, and his huge body moved slightly closer to Ye Rong, and his slender arms stretched directly towards her. Seeing this, Ye Rong held his breath, closed his eyes nervously, and gripped both sides of the seat tightly with both hands. My heart was beating like a drum, and my long eyelashes were trembling slightly because of excessive tension. Chapter 12. He treats her like a princess. Gu Yanchen leaned forward slightly and moved closer to Ye Rong. The distance was so close that he could almost hear their rapid heartbeats. The next second, Gu Yanchen's slender and powerful hand quickly crossed over her chest. Gently and skillfully pull the seat belt on the passenger seat, carefully pull the seat belt to the appropriate position, and carefully buckle the seat belt. What Ye Rong imagined in her mind did not happen as expected, and she realized that she had misunderstood. Thinking of her messy thoughts just now, she couldn't help feeling embarrassed, and her cheeks instantly flushed like a ripe tomato. She turned her head in panic and faced the car window with her blushing face, wishing there was a crack in the ground that she could crawl into and hide in. Oh my god, what on earth was I thinking about? Gu Yanchen was the president of the GU group, famous for his abstinence, so how could he do that to her in the car? I am getting old, really. Gu Yanchen looked at the embarrassed Ye Rong and his mood improved. The corners of his mouth rose involuntarily, revealing a smile, and then he started the car. He didn't expect that a 40-year-old woman still had such an innocent side. For a moment, he was secretly delighted in his heart. It seems that I have really found a treasure this time. Let's go and meet my parents. Gu Yanchen's steady voice broke the awkward atmosphere in the car. Hearing this, Ye Rong, who was nervous just now, was suddenly startled. He stared at Gu Yanchen with wide eyes, his face full of disbelief. She subconsciously raised her voice and asked, "Meet your parents? Isn't that too fast?" As she spoke, she looked down at the cleaning clothes she hadn't had time to change out of, and added anxiously, "Besides, I'm still wearing this work clothes. It's not appropriate to just go over there like this, right?" Faced with Ye Rong's series of worries, Gu Yanchen remained exceptionally calm and composed. His eyes, as deep as a pool of water, stared at the road ahead, and he responded firmly, "They are very open-minded. Don't worry, leave everything to me." After saying that, he turned his head and gave Ye Rong a look that was full of confidence and comforting. Just such a simple look made Ye Rong, who was originally restless and confused, calm down instantly. Ye Rong glanced cautiously at the young and energetic Gu Yanchen beside her. Her uneasy heart gradually calmed down when she saw his profile with clear contours and a resolute look. Although he is the same age as her son, she always feels inexplicably at peace when she is with him. That kind of peace seemed like a clear spring flowing out from the depths of her heart, moistening her often restless heart. Gu Yanchen parked the luxury car steadily in front of the largest luxury shopping mall in City B. These luxury goods industries all belong to GU International. Before coming here, Gu Yanchen specifically issued instructions to their mall management, requiring all stores to suspend business to the public today. In this way, the entire huge shopping mall today belongs only to Gu Yanchen and Ye Rong. Ye Rong followed Gu Yanchen carefully and slowly stepped into this dream shopping mall. She raised her head nervously, her eyes falling on the doorplate that exuded a noble and high-end atmosphere, and she couldn't help but feel a dreamlike feeling in her heart. This is the top-notch and most luxurious luxury building in City B. Only those gold members with a large fortune and assets exceeding 100 million are eligible to enter. Poor people like her are not worthy of setting foot here. The two of them stepped into the automatic door, and the moment it opened, they saw 2 rows of young, beautiful sales clerks neatly lined up on both sides of the door. With smiles on their faces, they gracefully saluted Gu Yanchen and Ye Rong, and said in unison, "Welcome Mr. Gu and Mrs. Gu to our store." Such a grand scene before him was actually not unfamiliar to Ye Rong. Only this time, she wasn't standing in line to welcome other people's cleaning staff. At this moment, the role changed drastically. She was no longer the humble cleaning lady, but had transformed into a distinguished guest who attracted much attention. This sudden change of identity made Ye Rong feel at a loss. The thoughtful Gu Yanchen naturally noticed her embarrassment and uneasiness, so he slowly stretched out his broad and warm hand, tightly held Ye Rong's slightly cold hand, and clasped their fingers together. "Are you ready?" Gu Yanchen asked softly, his tone so gentle that it seemed to melt people's hearts. At this moment, Ye Rong's eyes were full of panic and confusion. Her beautiful big eyes stared straight at the handsome man in front of her, and she didn't know how to answer for a moment. Gu Yanchen smiled, and without giving Ye Rong a chance to react, he led her into a large and luxurious dressing room. Ye Rong sat in front of the giant makeup mirror, a little awkwardly, like a frightened deer. The makeup artist and hairdresser who had been waiting for a long time walked up to Ye Rong, bowed to her respectfully, and began to create a new look for her. These people were world-class masters that Gu Yanchen had invited from Paris at great expense specifically for Ye Rong, just to dress Ye Rong up beautifully. During the whole process, Gu Yanchen was always by her side. He sat quietly on a comfortable sofa about 1 meter behind Ye Rong's dressing chair, reading the newspaper calmly. But whenever he felt Ye Rong's gaze on him, he would put down the newspaper, smile at her in the dressing mirror and nod. His smile is gentle and charming, and his every move shows his gentlemanly demeanor and elegant temperament. Such a perfect man is simply the dream lover that all women dream of. At the same time, a fashion designer invited from France carefully selected more than a dozen sets of luxury clothing in different styles for Ye Rong to choose from based on her body proportions. Since Ye Rong seldom buys clothes, she does not have much confidence in her own aesthetic taste and does not know how to match clothes. Faced with so many gorgeous clothes, she had no choice but to change into them one by one, and nervously asked Gu Yanchen to help her choose. Gu Yanchen showed extraordinary patience. He would carefully observe the overall effect of Ye Rong after putting on each set of clothes, and give concise and clear evaluations and suggestions based on its characteristics. With his help, Ye Rong, who originally lacked confidence, gradually became braver. This made Ye Rong, who had never been treated kindly, gradually develop a liking for Gu Yanchen. Ye Rong couldn't help but recall what happened more than 20 years ago when her first husband Xu Dehai took her to a simple vegetable market to buy vegetables. When passing by a clothing stall, Ye Rong's eyes were involuntarily attracted by the eye-catching red plaid suit on the stall. The bright red color and the delicate plaid pattern interweave with each other, making it the most popular pattern among girls nowadays, and almost everyone owns one. Ye Rong couldn't help but ask about the price. It turned out to be 25 yuan, which was very expensive at that time when resources were scarce. She tried it on again and again in front of the mirror, put it on again, and couldn't let it go. The person in the mirror is perfectly outlined by the blazer, and the red plaid design makes her look playful, cute and full of energy. At this moment, I suddenly heard my husband's impatient and disgusted voice, "Take it off quickly. Look at yourself, you look like a pig. Do you really think you can match such beautiful clothes? The $20 or so I spent on a piece of clothing is enough for me to play more than 10 games in the casino." Chapter 13 Is 50 million enough? At that moment, Ye Rong's eyes were filled with tears of grievance. Since her marriage, her life has fallen into endless darkness. Her husband, who was addicted to gambling, never gave her the slightest bit of affirmation, only constant denial, verbal abuse and domestic violence when he was drunk. Over time, she, who was once charming and beautiful, gradually lost her confidence. Finally, under the contemptuous eyes of her boss, she reluctantly put down the blazer. Thinking of this, Ye Rong couldn't help feeling sad. "Let's take this one." Gu Yanchen's deep and magnetic voice came into Ye Rong's ears, interrupting her painful and unpleasant memories. Gu Yanchen put down the magazine in his hand and nodded with satisfaction. "It looks good." Ye Rong smiled at him gently, with gratitude and tenderness. After careful selection, Ye Rong finally chose a white modified cheongsam with a strong Chinese classical charm. The lines of the cheongsam are delicate and smooth, as natural as flowing clouds and running water. The silk used is the most popular and expensive material today. It is smooth, soft and feels great. The design is simple and generous, yet elegant and graceful, perfectly setting off Ye Rong's exquisite figure. After choosing the clothes, Ye Rong started to do her hairstyle. Another 2 hours passed. After finishing her hair, Ye Rong gently pushed open the door of the fitting room and walked out slowly. At this moment, Gu Yanchen's eyes, which had been as calm as water, suddenly flashed with a gleam of astonishment, and his whole body seemed to be frozen, and he could no longer move his gaze away from Ye Rong. Although he is young, due to his status, there are countless beauties and sexy girls who want to get into bed with him. But he never expected that Ye Rong, who usually had a plain face, could be so stunningly beautiful and breathtaking with just a little makeup. At this time, the beautiful sales clerks lined up, each wearing white gloves and holding a jewelry box worth tens of millions in their hands. They walked into the dressing room in a well-trained manner and quickly stood in a row. Gu Yanchen walked past each piece of jewelry, carefully selecting them, and finally chose a dazzling pearl necklace. This necklace is made up of countless even-sized, round and smooth pearls, each of which exudes a charming luster and is worth tens of millions. Gu Yanchen carefully picked up the pearl necklace, walked behind Ye Rong, and gently put the necklace on Ye Rong's fair neck. Then she took a pair of crystal shoes from the waiter, knelt on one knee, and gently put them on Ye Rong's feet. Gu Yanchen stood up, took Ye Rong's hand and slowly walked to the mirror. Ye Rong stared at himself in the mirror in disbelief, and was a little dazed for a moment. The woman in the mirror had lips as red as ripe cherries, so tender that water seemed to come out of them. Her skin, as white as snow, was as smooth and delicate as mutton fat jade. Coupled with the exquisite and expensive high heels on her feet, she looks tall and elegant. At this moment, she was as radiant as a movie star who had walked out of the TV screen. Just as Ye Rong was immersed in her own beauty, Gu Yanchen had already changed into a high-end custom-made suit and walked out of the dressing room. He walked towards Ye Rong with a vigorous step and said, "Let's go." He smiled and stretched out his bent arm to Ye Rong, motioning her to hold it. Ye Rong nodded slightly and responded. Then, she took a deep breath, trying to calm her inner excitement and nervousness. She took a step forward confidently and put her arm around Gu Yanchen's. As long as Gu Yanchen was there, she seemed to feel that everything was not so scary anymore. A luxurious manor with thousands of acres of land outside the city. The manor is magnificent and beautiful, especially the rosewood gate, which gives people a sense of solemnity and majesty. When Gu Yanchen's luxury car approached, the rosewood door slowly opened automatically. The car stopped steadily in the yard of the luxurious manor. Gu Yanchen was the first to get out of the car with graceful and neat movements. Then he turned around and extended his warm palm to Ye Rong in the car. Seeing this, Ye Rong hurriedly held his hand, stepped on her crystal-clear high heels, and got out of the car carefully. Although Ye Rong looked calm and composed at this moment, his heart was actually filled with nervousness and anxiety. She held Gu Yanchen's arm tightly with her hands wearing white velvet gloves, with such force that it almost embedded into his muscles. I don't know when a layer of fine beads of sweat appeared on his forehead, flickering faintly under the light. Because she knew very well that this visit meant a lot to her, she was even mentally prepared for the possibility of being insulted or ruthlessly kicked out of the house. After all, there was a huge gap in family background between her and Gu Yanchen. One of them was from an ordinary family, while the other came from a well-known wealthy and prestigious family, the Gu family. Not only that, he is much older than Gu Yanchen. Putting such disparity in conditions together, even any other ordinary family would probably find it difficult to accept, let alone a super-rich family like the Gu family who stands at the top of the wealth pyramid. Gu Yanchen noticed Ye Rong's uneasiness and gently comforted her. "It's okay, don't worry." Those gentle words were like a spring breeze blowing through Ye Rong's heart, relaxing her tense heartstrings a little. Then, Gu Yanchen added, "I'm here." This sentence was like a reassurance, making Ye Rong feel extremely relieved. "It's okay, don't worry." Afterwards, under the respectful and polite guidance of the butler, the two walked slowly along a corridor covered with exquisite carpets and finally arrived at the spacious hall of the manor. I saw a heavy brown-red sandalwood door close tightly, and the intricately carved patterns on the door showed an ancient and elegant atmosphere. The butler took a step forward and stretched out his hand to slowly push the wooden door open from the outside to the inside. As the door opened, a faint scent of sandalwood wafted into the air. There was an antique red sandalwood coffee table in the hall, and in front of the coffee table sat a graceful and elegant woman, Gu's mother. She was wearing a crimson satin velvet cheongsam, which was well cut and had smooth lines, perfectly outlining her graceful figure. She was wearing a fox fur cape as white as snow, which made her look more elegant and graceful. At this moment, Mother Gu was holding an exquisite teacup gracefully, savoring the tea in the cup carefully. This tea is Ju tea, freshly picked from an Australian tea garden this morning. It has a fresh and mellow taste and a rich aroma. Although Gu's mother is over 50 years old, she pays attention to maintenance and health preservation on a daily basis, so she looks without any signs of vicissitudes of life. On the contrary, her skin is as delicate and smooth as cream, her face is as pretty as a girl, and her every move exudes the charm and grace unique to a mature woman. "Mom, this is my new wife, Ye Rong." Gu Yanchen introduced calmly with a smile on his face, a burning tone and a deep gaze. Ye Rong, who was standing at the side, lowered his head nervously, his hands tightly grasping the corners of his clothes, and opened his lips with trembling lips, uttering a greeting as thin as a mosquito, "Hello." The voice was so quiet that I was afraid I couldn't even hear it. At this moment, the butler who had been standing quietly behind them suddenly stepped forward, bowed his head respectfully and said, "Master, the master asks you to go to the study." Hearing this, a hint of subtle uneasiness flashed across Gu Yanchen's eyes for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. He first glanced at the housekeeper with a sharp gaze, then turned his gaze coldly to his mother, but did not move for a long time. Upon seeing this, Mother Gu gently put down the exquisite teacup worth tens of millions in her hand. The corner of his mouth curled up a faint smile, and he teased slowly, "Why? Are you afraid that I will eat your newlywed wife?" After saying this, she stared at the two people in front of her with interest, waiting for her son's response. After a moment of silence, Gu Yanchen slowly spoke and whispered to Ye Rong beside him, "I'll be back soon, wait for me." Gu Yanchen and Ye Rong both understood that this was a deliberate attempt to send him away, but they had no choice but to do it. After Gu Yanchen's figure completely disappeared from sight, the smile on Gu's mother's face immediately disappeared, replaced by an expression of great contempt. She raised her chin, looked at Ye Rong in front of her with a condescending attitude, and asked coldly, "Tell me, how much money do you want to leave Yanchen? Is 50 million enough?" 50 million. Ye Rong raised an eyebrow and asked with a half smile, "Isn't that too little?" Chapter 14 Money Again. This scene was very similar to the many novels about wealthy families that Ye Rong had read. Most of the wealthy mothers-in-law liked to use money to appease the daughters-in-law they disliked. She never expected that one day she would appear in such an absurd drama. 50 million. Ye Rong raised an eyebrow and said with a half smile, "Isn't it too little?" Mother Gu crossed her hands proudly in front of her chest and said, "You are quite old, and you are quite arrogant. So, tell me a number. Do you think your son's marriage is worth only 50 million? Ye Rong calmly retorted with courage. "Then how much do you want?" Mother Gu stared at Ye Rong. "How much?" Ye Rong asked back, "How much do you have?" "I'm afraid you'll be scared to death if I tell you, so just name a price." Mother Gu turned around and sat on the sofa with an arrogant look. Ye Rong smiled bitterly. "Hundreds of billions. Several trillion. Well, I'll take as many as you have." "What a huge request you have," Mother Gu said with a cold face. Ye Rong smiled and said, "Don't you want to give it to me? That's why I said that I don't want a single cent from your Gu group." Not for money. Because he's young? Because he's strong. Gu's mother snorted confidently, "Do you dare to say that if Yanchen was a penniless pauper, you would still be with him? Oh, I've seen a lot of women like you, pretending to be noble and doing whatever it takes to climb up the social ladder and get into my son's bed." Ye Rong crossed her arms and said, "So your son is so despicable in your eyes that anyone can climb into his bed?" Ye Rong's answer was powerful. Her marriage to Gu Yanchen was an accident. It was because Gu Yanchen was tricked by those who wanted to get into his bed that he had sex with her. He had sex with her, did not shirk responsibility, did not settle the matter with money, but took responsibility for her, married her, and gave her a legitimate status. This is what a man of integrity does. Mother Gu could insult her, but she didn't want Mother Gu to look down on her son because of marrying her. "I heard that you are married for the second time. And you have a son." Gu's mother had a look of contempt on her face. She was already sure in her heart what kind of person Ye Rong was. "Yes." Ye Rong admitted generously. With the power of the Gu family, they must have already investigated her background thoroughly. Instead of hiding it, it is better to treat her sincerely. "Your son is a top student. I heard that he wants to start a business. My family can invest in him," said Gu's mother. "You don't want him to lose his future at such a young age because of his mother's wrong decision, do you? The son is the mother's weak point. Since she cannot control the money, the son's future and destiny are in Ye Rong's hands." Mother Gu stared at Ye Rong, waiting for her decision. "I want to be her daughter-in-law, tsk. Ye Rong could hear the threat from Gu's mother. "Are you trying to use my son to threaten me to leave your son?" "It's not a threat. If you want to count it, it's a deal at most." Mother Gu pursed her lips meaningfully. "It's all for our son. We are all mothers. We should understand each other. I know I'm not worthy of Mr. Gu." Ye Rong was interrupted before she could finish her words. "You know you are not worthy of him, but you still want to provoke him." The always kind Mother Gu glared at him, her voice trembling. "A cleaner dares to marry into my Gu family. You are already old, and you want to marry a young man in his 20s. Aren't you ashamed?" Ye Rong felt her self-esteem was deeply hurt. She clenched her cold fists and said calmly, "I can divorce your son, and you can look down on my work, but your son is a man who stands tall and proud. As for the money you mentioned, I won't take a penny from your Gu family. Gu Yanchen is not here, and I don't know who you are pretending to be noble for. Mother Gu glanced at Ye Rong coldly. The atmosphere in the living room dropped drastically, to freezing point. What are you talking about? You seem so excited. Father Gu spoke suddenly, breaking the freezing atmosphere in the living room. I saw him leaning on a crutch, limping over to the threshold of the living room. Following behind him, Gu Yanchen walked in. Ye Rong followed the voice and looked at Gu's father. She blurted out, "Brother Gu," with surprise in her eyes. "Ronga?" Father Gu's eyes were suddenly filled with shock. "Brother Gu." Gu Yanchen and Gu's mother exclaimed almost in unison. Chapter 15. She married the son of her first love. The memory goes back to 24 years ago. Gu's father, who was still young, came to Lingshan village where Ye Rong lived to join the production team. Ye Rong, who had just turned 17 at that time, was in her prime. She was as delicate and beautiful as a flower blooming in the morning. All the young men from the village who came with her secretly admired her, and Gu's father was naturally one of those many secret admirers. Ye Rong couldn't help but be deeply attracted by the gentle and elegant temperament of Gu's father. However, just when their love was about to sprout, a sudden piece of news was like a bucket of cold water poured over her head. Ye Rong's parents married Ye Rong to a man in the city. This news was like a bolt from the blue, and Father Gu fell into despair. From then on, Gu's father never heard from Ye Rong again, and this love affair with Bai Yueguang ended in vain. Father Gu returned to the city with a heart full of regret and helplessness. Not long after, as arranged by his family, he met, got to know, fell in love with his marriage partner who also came from a wealthy family, and eventually got married. This person is today's Mother Gu. Time flies, and 24 years have passed in the blink of an eye. During such a long time, Father Gu never thought that he would be able to meet Ye Rong again one day. Father Gu was so excited that he could hardly control himself and walked quickly towards Ye Rong involuntarily. When he approached Ye Rong, Father Gu subconsciously stretched out his hands and wanted to hold the other's hands. But just when he was about to touch it, he seemed to remember something and slowly pulled his hand back. His voice trembled slightly, and he said with endless longing and emotion, "So many years have passed, I really didn't expect to see you again. Have you been doing well these years?" Hearing this, Ye Rong's eyes couldn't help but become moist, and she was also extremely excited. She nodded repeatedly and quickly responded, "It's fine, everything is fine." As he spoke, his eyes fell on Gu's father. At this moment, Father Gu is no longer the handsome young man with a straight back and handsome appearance. Time is merciless and has turned his temples grey. He even needs the support of a cane to walk, and his steps seem a little unsteady. Father Gu's eyes never left Ye Rong from beginning to end. It was deep and fervent, as if wanting to see through the dust of time and let out all the longing that had accumulated in the heart over the years. He just stared at Ye Rong, completely forgetting the difference in status between them and the proper etiquette. Cough cough. Seeing this, Gu Yanchen on the side deliberately coughed twice, trying to remind his father who was lost in thought. Father Gu was brought back to reality by his son's cough. He suddenly realized his own gaffe and couldn't help laughing awkwardly. "Yes, sit down, come on, sit down and talk. Let's sit down and talk slowly. It's been a long time since we last met." As Father Gu spoke, he warmly invited Ye Rong to take a seat. Ye Rong first glanced cautiously at Gu Yanchen beside him. Seeing that the other party did not react, he sat down slowly and cautiously. At this moment, she felt mixed emotions. She could never have imagined that fate would play such a trick on her. She was actually asked to marry the son of the man who had made her heart beat fast back then. What kind of bloody fate is this? Just as Ye Rong was sighing inwardly, Gu's mother, who was sitting next to him, suddenly seemed to have changed her expression. The seriousness on his face disappeared in an instant, and was replaced by a gentle smile. She took Gu's father's arm affectionately and said cheerfully, "Oh, I didn't expect there would be such a fate. We are really a family." After that, Mother Gu turned around with a coquettish look on her face and said, "Oh my, I really can't play the role of the evil mother-in-law. I really can't play it, absolutely not." Gu's mother's sudden change made Ye Rong, who had already prepared for a divorce, suddenly at a loss. You know, just now, Gu's mother was confronting her and refusing to give in to her in order to force her to leave her son. However, when Father Gu and Gu Yanchen stepped into their house, Mother Gu seemed like a completely different person. I only heard Mother Gu sitting elegantly on the sofa and smilingly saying, "Good daughter-in-law, from today on, I will accept you as my daughter-in-law." As she spoke, Mother Gu reached out, held Ye Rong's hand tightly, and patted it gently. Then she shouted loudly, "Someone, come and serve tea to the new bride." As soon as the words fell, a nanny hurried out, holding an exquisite teacup in both hands, and walked respectfully to Mother Gu. The nanny bent slightly and lowered her head, appearing extremely humble and submissive. Mother Gu took Ye Rong's hand and pulled her close to her side and said, "Since you and my family have such a marriage, this is a fate given by heaven. I believe in fate." After saying that, he stretched out his well-maintained, delicate hands and held Ye Rong's slightly rough hands. She put a crystal-clear jade bracelet worth tens of millions on her wrist and put it on Ye Rong's wrist. "This is a gift from my mother when I got married. Now I give it to you." Upon hearing this, Ye Rong quickly waved her hands and declined, "No, no, no, this gift is too expensive. I can't accept it." As he spoke, he tried to remove the bracelet from his wrist. "Take it." Mother Gu gently held Ye Rong's hand, her eyes gentle but firm as she said, "You are the one who will spend the rest of my son's life with me. As long as you are sincere to my son, let alone this bracelet, even if Gu gave it to you, what's the harm?" As she spoke, Mother Gu turned her head and looked at her son Gu Yanchen earnestly, and continued to admonish him, "If this boy bullies you in the future, tell me and I will punish him." Hearing this, Ye Rong, who was originally a little reserved, suddenly felt his heart warmed, and a warm current instantly surged to his eyes. She never thought that she would be able to gain her mother-in-law's recognition and love so quickly. This sudden feeling of happiness made her feel a little shy. Her fair face turned red because of shyness, like a ripe apple. Mother Gu urged Ye Rong lovingly, "What are you still standing there for? Hurry up and serve the tea." "Oh, yes." Ye Rong took the teacup in panic and slowly squatted down. He raised the teacup high above his head, handed it to Mother Gu respectfully, and said softly, "Mrs. Gu, have some tea." "Still call me Mrs. Gu." Mother Gu curled her lips. Gu Yanchen, who was standing beside him, smiled and reminded, "Call Mom." Mom, yes, Mom, please have some tea." Ye Rong hurriedly changed her words nervously, her voice trembling slightly. Mother Gu's face was filled with a bright smile, and she happily took the teacup from Ye Rong's hand. He blew gently first, and then took a small sip carefully. Ye Rong took the second cup of tea from the nanny and raised it above his head. Father Gu, who was sitting on the sofa in front of him, hesitated for a moment and said, "Dad, have some tea." "Hey." Father Gu took the teacup with excitement in his eyes and took a sip. Originally, he was against Gu Yanchen's sudden marriage, and the person he married was a cleaning lady who was married for the second time and had children. This was simply a disgrace to their Gu family. Looking at their old friend in front of him, he no longer had any reason to object. Mother Gu put down the teacup, took out a bank card from the Gucci bag beside her, and gently placed it in Ye Rong's palm. He said kindly, "This is the money Mom and Dad gave you to change your name, take it and keep it well." It turned out that Gu's mother had been ruthless and harsh to Ye Rong just now, and she even threatened Ye Rong with the bright future of her son Shusong. It was just a test she carefully designed to test whether Ye Rong was with her son for money. Ye Rong's sincere expression and answer made her very satisfied, and she believed that Ye Rong would treat her son sincerely. However, in addition to Ye Rong's sincerity touching her, there was another unknown reason. As for the specific reason, she would have to wait until Mother Gu found a suitable opportunity in the future and secretly tell Ye Rong. Chapter 16, Sending Parents to the Island for Recuperation. "Thank you, Mom," Ye Rong said with a slightly trembling voice, holding the bank card in his hand. That's why those novels about wealthy families depict the vicious mother-in-law who is eloquent, stingy and has a bad temper. In fact, not all of them are true. The amiable Mother Gu in front of her made Ye Rong deeply feel the warmth and kindness of the Gu family. Able to cultivate outstanding talents like Gu Yanchen, parents must be even more special. Just as Gu Yanchen said, his parents were extremely open-minded and broad-minded people, full of love and tolerance. Thinking of this, Ye Rong was so excited that he choked up several times. After all, she had experienced a marriage that was too miserable to look back on. That marriage left her with endless pain and nightmares. The mean and sarcastic poor mother-in-law made things difficult for her in every way. A scumbag husband who cheated on his wife, committed domestic violence and was addicted to gambling. Fortunately, she finally plucked up the courage to break free and successfully escaped from that marriage that was like an abyss. Therefore, a wrong marriage is not a woman's fault, it is just a woman's past. Now, the gears of fate turned quietly, bringing her to the Gu family. Here, she felt unprecedented care and respect. As long as you have enough courage to say goodbye to those misfortunes, keep moving forward with determination, and you will eventually meet the person who is truly worthy of your lifelong commitment. At this moment, Father Gu slowly stood up with the help of a cane, a relieved and satisfied smile on his face. He said with emotion, "After all these twists and turns, we finally became a family." Sometimes fate is so mysterious and unpredictable that it is hard to grasp, but one cannot help but sigh and admire it. At this moment, Father Gu deeply believed in the existence of fate. At the same time, I also believe in cause and effect, and that everything is destined. At this time, Gu Yanchen slowly walked between his parents. He stretched out his slender arms and hugged Gu's father and mother's shoulders affectionately, and said mysteriously, "Dad, Mom, you will never imagine that I bought an island for you near Argentina." Hearing this, Father Gu couldn't help but be slightly surprised. Then he turned his head and asked in confusion, "When did this happen? How come I don't know anything about it?" Gu Yanchen smiled slightly, a sly look flashed in his eyes, and replied, "He, I just wanted to give you a big surprise, so I kept it a secret from you before. Look, the helicopter is here to pick you up." As he spoke, he raised his hand and pointed in the direction of the giant French window. Hearing this, everyone looked in the direction of his finger. Through the luxurious floor-to-ceiling windows, you can see the lush lawn of Acre Manor. A huge helicopter was approaching from afar and slowly descending to the ground. The strong wind caused by the propeller made the surrounding grass and trees sway, creating a spectacular scene. At this time, Mother Gu covered her mouth elegantly but couldn't help but smile. She pouted her lips in a mocking manner and said teasingly, "Oh my good son, you think your father and I are an eyesore here, so you want to send us away, for fear that we will disturb your sweet life with your new wife." Faced with his mother's teasing, Gu Yanchen quickly shook his head to deny it. His eyes were full of doting, and at the same time he revealed a smart smile. I explained, "No, don't misunderstand me, Mom. It's just because you casually said that you wanted to own an island in Argentina, and someone happened to be auctioning this island recently, so I bought it without hesitation and gave it to you and Dad as a wedding gift." Gu Yanchen chatted happily with his father and mother while walking slowly towards the plane parked not far away. Their shadows were lengthened by the setting sun, warm and harmonious. "Roma, ask Gu Yanchen to give me your personal Weibo later. I haven't talked to you enough." Mother Gu, who was halfway through her walk, suddenly turned back and said, "I want to hear you tell me about what happened when old Gu jumped the queue." "Okay, Mom, as long as you want to listen, I can always tell you those interesting things about Dad's time when he was sent to the countryside to work." Ye Rong nodded slightly. With a humble yet sweet smile on his face, he quickly responded. At this moment, the helicopter's propeller began to rotate at high speed, and strong winds swept in instantly. The strong wind whistled past, making it almost impossible to open one's eyes, and one's hair flew wildly in the wind. The deafening roar gradually covered up the conversation between the four people. The setting sun was like a burning flame, casting its last rays of light on Gu Yanchen's handsome face. He pursed his lips slightly, said nothing, just raised his head and stared quietly at the helicopter that was moving further and further away in the sky. At the same time, his broad and powerful hands tightly clasped Ye Rong's fingers, as if cherishing some treasure. Ye Rong also stared at the sky, watching the helicopter disappear into the distant clouds. Only when the tiny black dot completely blended into the golden sunset did she let out a long sigh of relief. She originally thought that she would be opposed by Gu's father and mother, and had even prepared for a divorce. Only now did she feel relieved. At this moment, in the manor's yard covered with thousands of acres of green lawn, only Gu Yanchen and Ye Rong were left. The breeze blew gently, and the tips of the grass swayed in the wind, making a slight rustling sound. Occasionally, you can hear the clear and melodious chirping of birds. Such a picture is like a beautiful pastoral poem, both peaceful and comfortable. "So, have you been ready for a long time?" Ye Rong turned his head slightly. Her beautiful eyes looked at Gu Yanchen beside her with curiosity and asked softly. In fact, before coming to meet his parents, Gu Yanchen was also very nervous and prepared for the worst. You know, he did not obey his parents' wishes and marry someone of equal status. Instead, he chose a divorced woman with a child. The child was about the same age as him, and the woman was more than 20 years older than him. So, just in case, he specifically instructed his assistant Kobayashi in advance to carefully select and buy a beautiful island in Argentina, his mother's favorite place. If his parents firmly opposed their marriage and made things difficult for Ye Rong, he would arrange for his parents to go to the island to recuperate for a while. He believed that his parents would accept it one day. However, what he never expected was, things went so smoothly, far beyond his initial expectations. It turned out that his parents were much more open-minded and broad-minded than he had imagined. Perhaps, his parents love him more and choose to accept everything he chooses. All I heard was Gu Yanchen saying softly, "We've had tea and met our parents. Madam, isn't it time to go back to our own home?" He was referring to Ye Rong moving to his villa. Before he finished speaking, he slowly lowered his head, raised his thin lips and couldn't help but gently kiss Ye Rong's left cheek, leaving behind a touch of his heat. The sudden intimacy instantly warmed Ye Rong's long-frozen heart. Just when the two were in love, Ye Rong's phone dinged with a message at an inopportune time. Ye Rong opened his phone to check, and an uneasy look immediately appeared on his face. Chapter 17. Can't you bear this? It is a notification from a primary school classmate reunion. She turned off her phone in panic, as if she was afraid of being discovered. He glanced at Gu Yanchen cautiously, his eyes full of anxiety. Gu Yanchen, who saw through Ye Rong's thoughts, said softly, "Go." Hearing this, Ye Rong couldn't help but widen his eyes, his face full of disbelief. She asked again, "Can I really go?" There was a hint of uncertainty and hesitation in his tone. "Of course, not only must you go, but you must also dress up to attend." Gu Yanchen replied with a smile, his eyes firm and warm. "My wife must be the most beautiful focus of the whole audience." After that, he gently kissed her on the forehead. Ye Rong's thoughts involuntarily drifted back to more than 20 years ago. At that time, she had just married her ex-husband Shu Dahai and received an invitation to a reunion with her elementary school classmates. She hadn't decided whether to go or not. Shu Dahai didn't know how he got the news about her classmates' reunion, and his face, which already had a horizontal shape, looked terribly gloomy. He shouted rudely, "You are not allowed to go." After saying that, he snatched the phone from her hand without hesitation. There was a loud bang, and the poor phone instantly broke into pieces, with parts scattered all over the floor. She was still young at the time and was so frightened that she stood there, completely at a loss as to what to do. What was even more terrifying was that in the next second, Shu Dahai suddenly reached out and grabbed her hair like a mad beast, dragging her forward on the cold and hard ground without mercy. She was still cursing, "Are you still thinking about attending the class reunion? Who are you still thinking about, you unfaithful woman?" She was in so much pain that tears were streaming down her face, but she didn't dare make a sound, for fear of further angering the man. Finally, he threw her hard into the cramped, dark and damp warehouse, and quickly turned around and locked the door. After doing all this, he picked up the little money left in the house without looking back and hurried out to play cards, leaving her alone shivering in a dark corner. She was locked in the warehouse for a whole day, with no food or water, and rats everywhere. These painful memories always accompany Ye Rong like a curse. Even after more than 20 years, they will suddenly come out at some point and torture her. Seeing Ye Rong lost in thought, Gu Yanchen tilted his head slightly and gently put his hands around Ye Rong's shoulders. "What are you thinking about? Are you so absorbed in your thoughts?" Gu Yanchen asked softly, raising his hand and gently scratching Ye Rong's nose lovingly. Ye Rong came back to his senses from his memories and shook his head in panic, stammering, "Nothing, nothing." She suddenly mustered up her courage, put her hands around Gu Yanchen's neck, stood on tiptoes and gave him a light kiss on the lips. The kiss was light and without any skill. Faced with Ye Rong's sudden action, Gu Yanchen's eyes were full of shock, and a mischievous smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. With a gentle hook of his powerful arm, he brought the person into his arms and lowered his voice and said, "Madam, do you want me to fulfill my husband's responsibilities here?" Hearing this, Ye Rong's cheeks instantly turned red, as tempting as a ripe apple. She lowered her head shyly and responded in a low voice, "Okay." Ye Rong's simple, "okay," instantly ignited the lust in Gu Yanchen's eyes. Without saying anything, he suddenly picked up Ye Rong and said in a low voice, "Don't cry and beg me later." After saying that, he strode towards the room, leaving behind beautiful scenery that aroused people's imagination along the way. Having lost control of herself, Ye Rong could only hug Gu Yanchen's neck tightly with her hands and shyly buried her face deeply in his arms. At this moment, Ye Rong felt so happy that she was almost melting in this happiness. Who would have thought? Gu Yanchen, who appears to be aloof and otherworldly, completely tears off his disguise in front of Ye Rong and turns into a considerate and naughty big boy. The next morning, the sun shone through the thin clouds. An extremely luxurious Lamborghini slowly approached and stopped in front of a luxury hotel. Inside the car, Ye Rong, wearing a snow-white autumn haute couture dress in ink style, was sitting upright in her seat, like a fairy descending to earth. The driver, Xiao Liu, got out of the car respectfully and quickly walked to the other side to open the door for Ye Rong. Ye Rong nodded slightly and stepped out of the car lightly. She walks steadily, and every step exudes a confident, generous, elegant and charming temperament. The slender legs are faintly visible under the cover of the skirt, adding a bit of mysterious charm. The most eye-catching thing is the top-quality jewelry necklace she wore around her neck. The pigeon egg-sized gem sparkles brightly under the sunlight, like a bright star in the night sky. She walked slowly towards the hotel venue wearing Bulgari's latest high heels. But he was suddenly stopped by the doorman who was guarding the entrance of the venue. The doorman politely said, "Hello, please show me your invitation." "Invitation? Okay, I'll find it for you." Ye Rong responded softly while quickly opening her exquisite handbag and starting to search. She clearly remembered that Gu Yanchen carefully helped her put the invitation into her handbag last night. But at this moment, no matter how carefully she looked, the invitation seemed to be playing hide and seek with her deliberately and was nowhere to be found. Could it be that when Gu Yanchen held her in his arms this morning? His thoughts couldn't help but drift to the morning. After a night of lovemaking, the energetic Gu Yanchen made a little tent in his quilt early in the morning and hugged her and kissed her. He hugged Ye Rong tightly, his big hands wandering restlessly on her body, and he kept murmuring for a hug and a kiss. Ye Rong was left defenseless by him. He coaxed her into the bathroom, his extremely gentle eyes flashing with a scorching light, as if he was going to eat her up in the next second. The rough palm rubbed against her thin waist, and the hard stubble pricked her neck and made it itchy. "Stop it." She begged for mercy with a hoarse voice that had been screaming all night. The haute couture dress she had originally put on became wrinkled as Gu Yanchen played with it. "No, the dress is wrinkled," Ye Rong reminded. "It's okay, I'll ask Xiaolin to bring a new one later." Gu Yanchen's voice was hoarse and seductive, and his hands held Ye Rong tightly between the sink and his broad chest. The mirror just reflected Ye Rong's most honest expression. She bit her lips in silence, her face flushed, and an unbearable and shameful moan came from her throat. "Madam, you can't stand this. It is true that a 20-year-old man is full of vigor and vitality, as fierce as a wolf or a tiger. This old lady really can't bear it." Chapter 18, stunning the audience. Then she changed into the haute couture dress she was wearing now under Gu Yanchen's naked gaze. Could it be that the invitation was dropped at that time? Just as Ye Rong was lost in thought. Suddenly, without any warning, two disgusting, sarcastic voices came from behind her. "Hey, look who this is. Oh my, isn't this the poor and unsophisticated Ye Rong in our class?" A woman in an exquisite dress was commenting on Ye Rong in an extremely sarcastic tone. "A cleaning lady has the nerve to attend such a high-class class reunion as ours. It's simply hilarious." Then, another woman, holding an exquisite Japanese folding fan, covered the corners of her slightly raised mouth just right. Her eyes were full of contempt and disdain as she continued to sneer, "Har ha har har. Har ha har har." For a moment, the two women seemed to be singing the same tune, one saying something after another, constantly making sarcastic and weird attacks on Ye Rong. "Let's go in quickly. We've been standing with people like this for a long time. The air is full of cleaning smell." After saying that, the two of them pretended to be disgusted and stretched out their hands to cover their noses tightly. Wearing high stilettos, she walked towards the door of the hotel venue with a swaying figure. It was as if they were the protagonists of this party. The woman in the dress is Li Xiqing, and the woman holding the folding fan is Wang Dan. They are both childhood classmates of Ye Rong. Hearing this, Ye Rong wanted to chase after him and argue, "I said." However, as soon as she took a step, the doorman who had always stayed at his post and done his job conscientiously blocked her way. The doorman expressionlessly repeated what he had said countless times, "Madam, please show me your invitation." Ye Rong had no choice but to suppress her anger and searched her handbag for the invitation again. After searching for a few minutes, Ye Rong finally found the invitation hidden in the secret compartment and handed it to the doorman. "Found it. Here it is. For you." After the doorman took the invitation, he checked it carefully and confirmed that it was correct. A respectful look immediately appeared on his originally indifferent face, and he made a gesture to Ye Rong to invite him in. "Please come in." Ye Rong walked into the gathering place elegantly, lifting her skirt and holding her head high, secretly thinking about what might happen next. She expected to meet these women at the party. When she was in school, these high-ranking rich girls bullied her just because she came from the countryside and her family was poor. Either they blocked her in the toilet and poured cold water on her, or they secretly cut her hair, or simply locked her in the toilet. Didn't he expect that now that everyone has entered middle age, they should have become more mature and stable? But the character of these people has not changed at all, but has become even worse. It's true that bad people don't become bad when they grow up, but are bad people at heart. However, now that he has come today, Ye Rong decided not to be submissive and swallow his anger like before. She wanted to take a good look at what these monsters and demons would look like when they grew up. After saying that, she straightened her chest and took each step more confidently and calmly. This class reunion was unprecedented and its scale was staggering. This gathering was carefully planned and organized by the former deputy monitor who in the class. It is said that he has now transformed himself into a wealthy coal boss with great financial resources. Because of this, in order to get close to this coal boss, most of the classmates came, and even some alumni came. At this moment, the spacious and bright conference hall was crowded and bustling. The students sat together in groups of 2 or 3, chatting and laughing. Or they hold wine glasses, clinking glasses back and forth, talking eloquently and incessantly, trying their best to show off their so-called success. At this time, the door of the venue was pushed open from the outside to the inside. Then, a beautiful figure came into everyone's sight. Ye Rong walked into the venue gracefully and calmly in silver high heels. She had a well-balanced makeup on her face that wasn't too over the top yet still highlighted her delicate features. The pure white, ink-painted strapless, trailing dress she was wearing perfectly highlighted her graceful figure. The moment she stepped in, the originally noisy meeting place suddenly became quiet. Everyone's eyes were fixed on her as if attracted by a magnet. Especially the sparkling jewel necklace on her neck, which is like the brightest star in the night sky, emitting a dazzling light. "Who is this? Why haven't I seen him before?" someone couldn't help but ask in a low voice out of curiosity. "Such temperament is absolutely amazing. She is as beautiful as a fairy." Another person's voice of praise rang out. For a moment, all kinds of discussions and praises about Ye Rong came one after another, filling the entire venue. A man with a fat and greasy face stood in the middle of the venue, holding a goblet in his right hand. The goblet was filled with dark red wine, which swayed gently with the swaying of his body. "Who is this?" There was a malicious light flashing in those narrowed eyes, and a half-smile hung on the corners of his mouth. "This fat, big-eared, wealthy man is the organizer of this class reunion, vice squad leader Who." The man with a pig kidney face beside him glanced at the figure in the distance, then snorted and said, "Isn't it the one whose husband cheated on her and has been working as a cleaner? What's her name?" "Oh yeah, I think her name is Rong. Look at her gorgeously dressed today. I really don't know who she is trying to seduce." As he spoke, the man couldn't help swallowing his saliva, as if he was extremely hungry. Soon after, another tall and thin man with glasses came over. He pushed up the pair of gold-rimmed glasses on his nose, revealing a pair of wretched little eyes. He stared closely at Ye Rong's curvy and graceful figure. "I can tell from the looks of it that she's good in bed. I'll have sex with her later and let the brothers have a taste of her." He was wearing a neat suit, but his sanctimonious temperament could not be concealed. Sure enough, when men get together, the topic they talk about often revolves around women. In their eyes, it seems that all women spend time and energy to dress themselves up carefully just to please men like them. I don't know where these people get their confidence and sense of superiority. TSK, TSK, TSK. You dare to sleep with a woman like this? Aren't you afraid of getting sick? Li Siqing, who had just laughed at Ye Rong at the door, was now elegantly holding a glass of high-end red wine. He rolled his eyes contemptuously at the man wearing glasses next to him. Then, she shifted her gaze to the dress Ye Rong was wearing. She smacked her lips with disgust and said, "Look at this dress, wow, it's so cheap, I think it might be a cheap item bought from a certain 1111 store. I don't know how many men she must have slept with to get the money for this cheap dress." Wang Dan waved the fan in her hand. "I think she is only worth 21 times. Go sleep with her. Don't pay more." Chapter 19 Women's War. Maybe they didn't even dare to take the label off the dress, and they had to return it after wearing it. Li Xiqing laughed coquettishly. "Poor merchant, they met such a cheap bitch. Is it real? I think the quality of the jewelry seems to be real." Another man next to him spoke. "How many jewels have you seen? Really? I think they were bought from a small commodity wholesale mall." Li Xiqing rolled her eyes in disdain. "With her poor appearance, what good things can a cleaner wear? Just look at this fake outfit, who knows how many men she must have slept with to get it." Sure enough, once a woman becomes jealous, she is scarier than a poisonous snake. She can easily make up stories and throw dirty water. The crowd who are unaware of the truth don't care whether it is true or not, they will naturally go to whichever side has the loudest voice. "Class Beauty Liu is here!" someone shouted in the crowd. Following this shout, everyone's eyes were attracted to the same direction as if by a magnet. I saw a tall woman wearing the same haute couture dress as Ye Rong, walking out of the crowd like a star surrounding the moon, surrounded by people. "Old classmates, long time no see." Class Flower Liu was seen with a smile on her face. He raised his arms enthusiastically and waved in the direction of Deputy Squad Leader Hu. "She is worthy of being the legendary class beauty, her every move is so beautiful. She is beautiful, but not natural enough, as if she was carved out of a mold in some celebrity training class. Even the way they speak, move and speak in the same coquettish tone are exactly the same." Hearing the shout, Deputy Squad Leader Hu's face immediately blossomed with an ecstatic smile. Oh, isn't this our beautiful Liu?" As he spoke, he quickly walked forward and gave Liu Banhua a gentle hug. After letting go of her hand, Deputy Monitor Hu looked up and down at Class Beauty Liu. He sincerely exclaimed, "Look, she is still so beautiful and charming. Time never defeats beauty." After hearing this, Liu Banhua couldn't help but pursed her lips coquettishly and said coquettishly, "Oh, look at your mouth, you still love to tease people like when you were in school. You are already old, what's the point of talking about being beautiful or not?" Deputy Monitor Hu shook his head disapprovingly and responded seriously, "What I said is all the truth. By the way, I heard that you are now married into a wealthy family and have become a rich lady. When can you introduce your husband to us old classmates? It will also allow me to take advantage of it and see the rich family." Upon hearing this, Liu Banhua raised her head slightly, her face filled with happiness and pride. She crossed her arms proudly and replied with a hint of boasting, "Hey, you should have told me earlier. He just drove me here in person and insisted on attending the class reunion with me." Li Xiqing, who was standing nearby, couldn't help but joked, "Har har, are you afraid that you'll be seduced by some handsome guy?" As soon as he finished speaking, several old classmates around him started laughing. When these people were students, their families were well known and wealthy in Lichun. Because of this, they have always had a very good relationship in school. Ye Rong, who came from the countryside to go to school in Lichun, unsurprisingly became the target of bullying and insults by these rich kids in their spare time. "Oh, that's annoying. You always make fun of me. But my husband is indeed quite jealous lately." Liu Banhua responded coquettishly, while raising her eyes smugly. At that moment, her eyes happened to fall on Ye Rong not far away. To her surprise, Ye Rong was wearing the exact same dress as her. And in comparison, Ye Rong looked noble and elegant, with outstanding demeanor and a youthful face, and was obviously much more handsome than her. In an instant, Liu Banhua's face turned as dark as ink. How could she tolerate that the ugly duckling that she had once trampled under her feet was now completely overshadowed by her? Thinking of this, a blazing fire ignited in her eyes. She suppressed her anger and asked in a low voice, "Is Ye Rong here too?" She remembered clearly that Ye Rong was already more beautiful than her when she was a child. Although Ye Rong was rustic and dressed simply and shabby at that time. But for some reason, the boys in the class just like her. Boys could often be seen taking the initiative to show their affection to Ye Rong. Liu Banhua at that time was puzzled by this and secretly cursed those boys in her heart whether they were blind. He ignores a beauty like himself and instead pursues a country girl. That's right, a strong smell of cleaning. Wang Dan on the side echoed sarcastically. The fan in his hand kept waving, as if trying to dispel some unpleasant smell. Then, she continued to sneer, how dare you come out and embarrass yourself by wearing the same fake couture dress as you, class flower Liu. You really don't know your place. I saw Liu Banhua holding a crystal clear wine glass in her hand, smiling contemptuously, with a smug look on her beautiful face. She walked slowly and gracefully towards Ye Rong, and Li Xiqing and Wang Dan followed her naturally. Her high heels made a crisp and rhythmic sound on the ground, as if signaling a demonstration. When she stood in front of Ye Rong, class flower Liu raised her head slightly and said provocatively in a slightly sarcastic tone, "Hey, look who is this? Isn't this Ye Rong, the most unsophisticated girl in our class? I never thought that you would have the nerve to attend the class reunion." Ye Rong, who was considering which piece of cake to eat on the table in front of him, turned around when he heard the voice. He looked up and down at Liu Banhua, pursed his lips and said in a neither humble nor arrogant manner, "Why? You can come, but I can't." Li Xiqing looked at him with contempt. "Who are you? Are you worthy of being compared with us?" Chapter 20. The class beauty's husband is the richest man in the world. Then what are your identities? There was no fear in Ye Rong's eyes as he looked at Li Xiqing calmly. "I'm afraid you'll be scared to death if I tell you." Wang Dan, with her fiery red lips, gently waved the fan, as if the fan was her shield, covering the fake nose she had just made. She pretended to be mysterious and said, "Our Liu Banhua is now the wife of the world's richest man. Do you know what the world's richest man is? I guess she has never seen 10,000 yuan in her life. How can such a country bumpkin know who the world's richest man is?" After saying this, Li Xiqing looked at Wang Dan and made a sharp and piercing laugh. "You said she married the richest man in the world." Ye Rong raised his hand wearing white velvet gloves and pointed at Liu Banhua elegantly. "What, you don't believe it?" Liu Banhua raised her eyebrows, with a hint of contempt in her questioning tone. Ye Rong smiled faintly and shook his head gently. "You are right. A poor man like me who has never seen 10,000 yuan has indeed never seen the world's richest man. Why don't you call him over so that I can admire his demeanor?" "We haven't even seen it, are you worthy of seeing it?" Li Xiqing's shouting became even more arrogant, like a peacock spreading its tail. Ye Rong covered her mouth, lowered her head and chuckled, "Since you haven't even seen it, who are you showing off for?" Ye Rong's sharp question was like a heavy hammer, hitting Li Xiqing's heart hard. She was suddenly flustered and couldn't respond for a while. "HMPH, don't think that you can become a rich man just by wearing the same high-end dress as Liu Banhua's. In my opinion, this dress of yours must be fake. Maybe you don't even want to take off the tag. Come on, let me take a good look at it," Wang Dan said with disdain. As he spoke, he stretched out his hand and touched Ye Rong's chest. Seeing that Wang Dan's hand was about to touch her body, Ye Rong's eyes turned fierce. She quickly covered her chest and raised her hand to knock away Wang Dan's hand that was about to make trouble. "Show some respect," Ye Rong shouted angrily. Look, it's so cheap. Are you afraid of being exposed as a fake and losing face?" Li Xiqing, who was standing nearby, saw this and raised the corner of her mouth contemptuously, revealing a mocking smile and said sarcastically, "Fake is fake, it will never become real." Ye Rong snorted and asked confidently, "You said what she was wearing was real. Why did she remember Gu Yanchen saying that the dress she was wearing was a global limited edition? The designer only designed this one-of-a-kind haute couture dress this year. I didn't expect this to be the same outfit. This is embarrassing. Then one of them must be wearing a fake. Are you saying that what you're wearing is real?" Har 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 har. Wang Dan raised her lips in a disdainful smile. She raised the fan in her hand and laughed sharply. "It's so funny. All the country bumpkins have to pretend to be real." At this moment, a man with a bald head walked slowly and steadily towards the four people who were in a stalemate. It instantly broke the tense atmosphere in the air. "Classmate, could you please dance with me?" The bald man stopped, stood still, bowed slightly, and stretched out his right hand in an elegant invitation. Then, he gently pushed the pair of gold-rimmed glasses on his nose, full of gentlemanly demeanor. Hearing this, the expression on Liu Banhua's face instantly became proud. She immediately straightened her waist and deliberately put on a reserved and shy look. She responded in a delicate voice, "See, some people don't know their own limits and try to imitate others, which only makes them a joke." That's right, that's right." Upon seeing this, Li Xiqing and Wang Dan quickly echoed like parrots, with disdain in their eyes. Ye Rong rolled his eyes in disdain. I thought, isn't it just someone asking me to dance? Is it necessary to be so proud as to be a peacock with its wings spread out? Liu Banhua covered her mouth and said delicately, I didn't want to dance at first, but since you are so sincere, I will reluctantly agree to it. She raised her arm slightly, and slowly extended her fair and slender hand towards the bald man in a slightly artificial manner, while continuing to flirt with him. The bald man nodded politely and said softly, Excuse me, it's this classmate. After that, he slowly turned his head to Ye Rong beside him and said, Can we dance together, classmate? Ye Rong was flattered and widened her eyes. Me? She had never been the center of attention, but at this moment, a hint of panic flashed in her eyes. Is it okay? The bald man asked softly. Chapter 21, The same old trick is used again, the haute couture dress has faded. A hint of hesitation flashed across Ye Rong's eyes. He glanced at Liu Banhua, whose face turned blue with anger, and the two followers who were just parroting him. She smiled slightly. She couldn't dance at first, but she gracefully stretched out her hand in a white velvet glove and replied cheerfully, I'd be happy to do it. Why wouldn't she agree to such a satisfying thing? Who is imitating others? Ye Rong said coldly, lifted her skirt and elegantly held the bald man's hand, then stepped lightly onto the dance floor. Gradually he disappeared from the sight of the three women whose faces had turned livid. Do these people still think she is as easy to bully as she was when she was a little girl? What era is this? Do you still expect her to swallow her anger? Watching Ye Rong's smug and provocative back as he left, the three women who had just lost face stood there in a daze, looking at each other. Their faces looked extremely ugly, they gritted their teeth, and flames of anger burned in their eyes. Har, what are you so proud of? Humph, is she saying I'm Dongsha? Liu Banhua hugged her arms tightly, her face full of resentment and dissatisfaction, and the flames burning in her eyes became more intense. I told you not to be proud for a while, wait and see how I deal with you. Over the years, Liu Banhua has become accustomed to the flattery and fawning from others, and no one has ever dared to ignore her or take her seriously. She would never allow anyone to steal her thunder. Especially Ye Rong, who was once trampled under her feet and was as humble as mud. The class reunion opened with thunderous applause. The first person to take the stage and give a speech was Deputy Class Leader who organized this class reunion. He walked onto the stage with a microphone in hand and walked confidently, then read from the 3-page speech in his hand. The speech was long and boring, full of small talk, and it made him feel dry-mouthed after reading it. Only then did Deputy Monitor Hu put down the microphone. Next, it was Liu Banhua's turn to go on stage and give a speech. She slowly walked onto the stage carrying a gorgeous evening gown. Under the spotlight, she had a gentle smile, graceful manners, and looked exceptionally elegant and calm. After standing still, she opened her red lips and talked incessantly about her past and present life. She tells how she built a career step by step with the help of her rich father, and how she successfully married the richest man with the help of her rich father. It is truly a model of successful people. To sum up, it can be said that her speech has nothing to do with the class reunion. She was just here to show off naked. Ye Rong rubbed her brows. As expected, such a party was not suitable for her. She shouldn't have listened to Gu Yanchen's encouragement and participated in this class reunion where everyone was focused on showing off their wealth. She missed her mop and bucket, at least they were real enough. Unlike the people here, who are just putting on a show and are extremely hypocritical. Ye Rong, who was not used to wearing high heels, had just agreed to dance with the bald man in order to spite herself with class flower Liu. Now she felt waves of pain in her ankles. While no one was paying attention to her, Ye Rong quietly got up and walked towards the bathroom. After entering the bathroom, she stood in front of the mirror and carefully touched up her makeup. She turned and walked into a separate bathroom cubicle, having already made up her mind that after she came out she would leave directly and go back to the hotel to work. She swore that she would never attend this cliché class reunion again. It was even more boring than the regular meetings held by hotel managers. After meeting your physiological needs, press the flush toilet button. Ye Rong smoothed the wrinkles on her gorgeous dress, raised her hand and prepared to turn the handle of the toilet door to open the door and leave. Unexpectedly, the door couldn't be opened. She twisted it hard several times but still couldn't open it. Based on her years of cleaning experience, she knew that the toilet door lock was stuck by something from the outside. Is there anyone outside? Is there anyone? Ye Rong called out loudly. The door lock is broken, can you help open it? Time passed, and only her voice echoed in the silent corridor, without any response. Ye Rong sighed helplessly, took out her cell phone from her handbag, and prepared to call the hotel front desk for help. At this moment, without any warning, a large basin of ice-cold water suddenly fell from the sky like a downpour, instantly soaking Ye Rong from head to toe. Ye Rong couldn't help but scream. The icy cold quickly spread throughout her limbs. Then, Li Xiqing's voice came from outside the door. Feel good, right? Har har. Since you've forgotten what it feels like, I'll splash it on you to wake you up. Li Xiqing's shrill laughter was arrogant and domineering. Ye Rong, why did you have to offend class beauty Liu when you could offend anyone else? Don't you even look at your own status? Ye Rong wiped away the water drops that kept flowing down his face with his hand, and the anger in his heart soared. In an instant I understood who had done this. After so many years, these people were actually using the same old tricks again. A painful memory came flooding back to her mind, bringing her back to her elementary school days. At that time, she was still a petite and introverted little girl. Liu Banhua and several of her female classmates locked her in the toilet cubicle. The little girl was so scared and helpless at that time that she could only bang on the door desperately to call for help. All she got in return was merciless ridicule from outside the door, and basin after basin of cold water fell from the sky, pouring coldly on her thin body. On a freezing winter day with the temperature only a few degrees below zero, she was soaked all over and was locked alone in the toilet for 2 hours. During this time, no one noticed that she was trapped. She kept banging on the toilet door and calling for help over and over again, but all she got in response was endless silence and coldness. Afterwards, the angry girl found her teacher and told him everything about the bullying she had suffered, hoping that the teacher would do justice for her. However, the reality disappointed her greatly. After listening to this, the teacher said lightly that it was just a prank among classmates and had no intention of punishing Liu Banhua and her accomplices. At that time, Ye Rong, who was still young, knew that the reason why it was unfair was entirely because Liu Banhua's family was powerful and influential, and even the principal had to be courteous when he saw her family. What could an ordinary student like her with no power and influence do even if she was bullied? Who would really care and pay attention to what happened to her? Thinking back to the present, middle-aged Ye Rong is facing the same dilemma as before. Do you still think this is a child? I'm grown up now, and I'm not afraid of you. After saying that, she, shivering from the cold, lifted up her skirt, used all her strength, raised her leg and kicked hard at the toilet door. The toilet door lock was kicked open. She rushed out of the bathroom desperately. However, the huge bathroom was already empty. At this moment, Ye Rong was wet all over, from head to toe, with water droplets constantly sliding down her hair and cheeks and dripping onto the ground. The biting cold quickly spread throughout her body and she couldn't help shivering. The self in the mirror looked disheveled and embarrassed, like a drowned rat. She thought that she should leave the venue as soon as possible while no one was around. I'll settle accounts with these people later. But to leave the venue she had to pass through the hall of the alumni reunion. She lowered her head and walked hurriedly towards the exit, thinking that no one would notice her in a venue with so many people. Just as she was about to reach the door, Liu Banhua suddenly appeared in front of her, blocking her way. Class Flower Liu had a malicious smile on her face and deliberately raised her voice and said, "Hey, Ye Rong, where are you going in such a hurry? Our class reunion isn't over yet." Following Liu Banhua's high-pitched voice, all eyes in the venue were instantly fixed on Ye Rong. Ye Rong could only lower her head as much as possible to try to hide her makeup that was ruined by the water. However, at this moment, something unexpected happened. The luxurious high-end ink wash dress she was wearing suddenly began to fade after being soaked in water. The carefully drawn ink and color painting on the dress seemed to have lost its vitality at this moment. The color gradually became dull and faded slowly. As the long train of the dress flowed to the ground, black water marks were like ink, staining the smooth floor in varying depths. The black water marks of different depths intertwined together were disgusting. Oh my, what is this strange smell? It's so stinky. Li Xiqing couldn't help but frown, covering her nose tightly with her hands, and complaining with disgust on her face. Liu Banhua raised her proud neck and sneered, "Ye Rong, even if you can't afford the genuine product, when you buy those fakes, at least pick one with slightly better quality. Look at this dress, it's even faded after being soaked in water, it's really laughable." Seeing Ye Rong in such an embarrassed state, she felt relieved inside. She just wanted to see Ye Rong embarrass herself in front of everyone. The goal is to step the banyan tree back into the mud. Ignorance is really terrible. At this time, a woman with a princess-cut hairstyle walked out of the crowd and stared at Liu Banhua with sharp eyes. It is obvious that he has ill intentions. Who do you think you are? How dare you speak nonsense here? Chapter 22. Ask her to kneel down and apologize. Ye Rong lowered her head when she heard this, and only then did she notice that the dress she was wearing had begun to fade at some point. She was also puzzled. How could the dress suddenly fade after coming into contact with water? This dress was delivered to her personally by her driver Xiao Liu in the morning. Could it be that Gu Yanchen was deceived? Was the thing he was wearing just a fake? But no matter whether the dress was a fake or not, this Banhua Liu repeated the same trick she used to bully her. Now she is middle-aged and no longer the weak and helpless little girl. She must not let herself become a joke again and be bullied. Moreover, her identity is different now. She is now Gu Yanchen's wife. She not only has to protect her own rights and interests, but also needs to maintain Gu Yanchen's face. She was just about to open her mouth to refute. A woman with a princess-cut hairstyle slowly walked out from behind the crowd. The woman opened her red lips and spoke first. Ignorance is terrible. Immediately, it attracted the attention of everyone present and caused people around to whisper. When Liu Banhua heard this, her eyelids suddenly raised and she shot a sharp look at the woman. She looked her over carefully from head to toe. She was wearing a dress of unknown brand, with an incompatible smoky makeup, and she looked shabby. Liu Banhua couldn't help but feel a bit of contempt in her heart, and her originally high chin was now raised even higher, almost pointing to the sky. Who do you think you are? How dare you speak nonsense here? Liu Banhua showed disdain on her face. The princess-cut woman didn't care. Instead, she smiled and shook the red wine glass in her hand confidently. It's not surprising that this lady doesn't recognize me. After all, she doesn't have much experience. But I am a magnanimous person and I won't care about these things. The princess-cut woman's words were soft and every word was full of sarcasm. When Liu Banhua heard this, she became so angry that her face turned blue and her chest heaved violently like an enraged lioness. Where did this ignorant bastard come from? This is a place where you can act wild as you please. What are the security guards for? Why do they let all kinds of people in there? Liu Banhua no longer cared about her image and started cursing. As she cursed, she snorted coldly through her nose. Faced with Liu Banhua's fierce reaction, the princess-cut woman not only did not back down, but burst out laughing. What a sharp-tongued mouth. It's a pity that it should be located below. You. This was the first time that Liu Banhua was scolded so harshly. She was so angry that she could only think of even harsher rebuttals. The woman rolled her eyes at her, bent down slightly, stretched out her hands and gently lifted up Ye Rong's long, trailing skirt. With a confident smile on her face, she said, "Look at this dress. It is the real thing. What you are wearing is just a crudely made knockoff. I advise you to change it quickly, or you will be embarrassed and laughed at by everyone." Hearing this, Wang Dan twisted her slender waist without any concern and walked slowly and charmingly around the woman. Her narrow eyes were filled with contempt and disdain, as if she was looking at a clown. The skirt has faded like this, really? Do you think everyone will believe you just by saying it? Do you think everyone is blind? Liu Banhua on the side suppressed her inner anger. She placed her left arm flat on her chest, then lifted her right elbow steadily with her left hand, and gently rested her chin with her right hand, showing a confident and calm posture. He sneered and said, "Well, since you insist that what she is wearing is genuine, then show me the evidence. Ye, what you said she was wearing was real. Produce evidence." There were doubtful voices among the onlookers. Faced with everyone's doubts and difficulties, Ye Rong didn't want to implicate others and get involved in this meaningless dispute because of herself. So, she stepped forward, blocked the princess-cut woman with her body, and said firmly, "This is a matter between you and me. It has nothing to do with this lady. Don't make things difficult for others." Seeing Ye Rong stepping forward without knowing his own limitations, Wang Dan became even more arrogant. She waved the folding fan in her hand triumphantly, raised a wanton arc at the corner of her mouth, and shouted loudly, "Since you said so, if I don't agree, it means I don't give you face. If I don't give you face, it will affect the mood of the students present." Wang Dan closed the folding fan in his hand and walked in front of Ye Rong. Then he raised his fan and used the handle to poke Ye Rong's shoulder again and again, while saying viciously, "Then kneel down and admit your mistake to Liu Banhua, and this matter will be written off." "Kneel down." Ye Rong chuckled. He used the handle of the fan to poke Ye Rong's shoulder. "Kneel down and apologize to Liu Banhua, and this matter will be written off." "Kneel down." Ye Rong chuckled. It was as if I had heard the biggest joke in the world. She raised her head, stared straight at Wang Dan, and said sarcastically, "Kneel down. Do you think the Qing dynasty has not yet fallen? Do you think you are still living in the last century? You always ask people to kneel down and admit their mistakes. It's ridiculous. And don't think too highly of yourself, thinking that you are some great person. In fact, you are nothing." Then, Ye Rong straightened his back, and swept his eyes firmly and sharply over the people in front of him, and continued, "Besides, this is a society ruled by law, and there are surveillance cameras everywhere. You just locked me in the bathroom, splashed water on me, and bullied me. I'll call the police, and none of you can escape." At this time, Liu Banhua and the other two women standing aside could not help but look at each other with surprise on their faces. Obviously, they had never expected that the middle leaf banyan tree would become so difficult to bully and even know how to use surveillance to protect itself. But how could they, who are rich and powerful, be afraid of such a small scene? They smiled at each other fearlessly, their eyes full of arrogance. After all, Liu Banhua's family background is powerful and her influence is overwhelming. What's the big deal about throwing water or bullying someone? How we handled it then can still be handled today. Liu Banhua raised her chin slightly and put on a superior attitude. He said to Ye Rong arrogantly, "Then go call the police." "Humph, then I'll see whether the police will believe what I say or what you say. Then I'll sue you for defamation." "You?" Ye Rong was so angry at Liu Banhua's ability to confuse right and wrong that he didn't know what to say. In today's society, how can a person be so arrogant? The princess cut the woman suddenly interrupted the argument. "Hey, didn't the lady just keep yelling for evidence? Look, the evidence is here." The corners of her mouth slightly raised, with a faint smile on her face. She raised her slender jade finger and pointed at Ye Rong's dress, from which the moisture had almost evaporated. Following the direction of her finger, everyone's eyes were stunned. Chapter 23. The jewelry necklace is missing. As everyone looked at them in astonishment, an incredible scene happened as the water from Ye Rong's faded dress slowly evaporated. The exquisite ink painting has disappeared without a trace. Instead, there is a mysterious tone that gradually transitions from light to dark and then to a rich tone. Finally, a dreamy gradient is formed. It's like the afterglow of the setting sun is scattered on the sea. The colors are clearly layered and rich, just like the colorful feathered clothes worn by fairies. It perfectly sets off Ye Rong's graceful and curvy figure. If the dress was dignified and elegant before it faded, then now it has been transformed again after fading. It presents a more luxurious and noble gradient beauty, and its sense of layering becomes stronger. Plus the crystal foil inlaid on the hem of the skirt. Under the bright lights, the gradient brilliant colors of the dress itself are intertwined and set off each other. Ye Rong widened his eyes, his face full of disbelief. She stared blankly at the dress that had undergone a drastic change on herself, and her heart was shocked. How could there be such an ingenious design in the world? What kind of talented designer can design such a variety of dresses? This is not just a piece of clothing, it's more like a work of art. At this moment, Ye Rong once again became the focus of the party because of the change of her dress. The eyes of the men and women at the scene were fixed on her, their gazes full of admiration and envy. Liu Banhua, who had deliberately intended to embarrass Ye Rong in public, not only failed to succeed, but instead made Ye Rong amaze the audience once again. This made Liu Banhua even more furious. Liu Banhua crossed her arms in front of her chest, still with an arrogant expression, and said contemptuously, "Humph. It's just a trifle, it can only fool the country bumpkins who have never seen the world. Can this alone prove that what she is wearing is genuine?" Facing the aggressive questioning from Class Flower Liu, the woman with the princess cut hairstyle just smiled calmly. She replied softly, "I'm sorry, I'm not talented enough. I am the designer of this dress." As soon as these words were spoken, the people around were suddenly in an uproar, with sounds of surprise coming one after another. Then it is clear at a glance who is wearing the real dress and who is wearing the fake dress. No one expected that the seemingly ordinary woman in front of them would be the creator of that amazing dress. This way, it will be clear who is wearing the real dress and who is wearing a knockoff. Liu Banhua first laughed as if she had heard a joke, and said sarcastically, "Har har har, this is really hilarious. You can't just say that you are the designer of this dress. Do you know the name of the designer of this dress? And you are the designer, how do you prove it?" "The designer of this dress is called Carice, and I am Carice," the woman with the princess cut said calmly. "Humph, you keep saying you are Carice, but where is your ID?" Li Xiqing stretched out her hand to the princess cut designer with a provocative look on her face. "Show it to me, and I'll believe it. This is ridiculous. This is the first time I've heard that you need an ID to attend a party. I don't have one, but I do have an invitation," Kara said angrily as she searched for the invitation in her handbag. Today was truly an eye-opener for her. It was the first time in her life that she had to deal with the absurdity of having to prove that she was herself. "Haven't you found it yet?" "I'm afraid it may not exist at all," she urged again. Karis turned her entire handbag upside down, but still couldn't find the invitation. She raised her head slowly with an ugly expression, and said awkwardly and helplessly, "The invitation seems to be gone." Hearing this, Liu Ban on the side couldn't help but let out a sarcastic laugh. "TSK TSK TSK, you were pretending to be a famous brand designer just now, but now you're exposed, right? Let me tell you, the real Karis designer is watching the show at Paris Fashion Week right now, you're just a fake." After saying that, she turned around with a sneer and shouted to the security guard not far away, "Security, security, come here quickly. Get this fake guy who eats and drinks for free out." "Wait." Ye Rong stood in front of Karis. "I brought the people here, who are you trying to drive away?" Just when the scene reached a stalemate, the smooth-talking deputy monitor who came out to smooth things over, "Oh my beautiful old classmate, calm down. This is not a big deal. Let her eat and drink for free. We are not so poor that we need one person to eat and drink, right?" Hearing this, Liu Banhua, who was originally angry, instantly softened her expression and the corners of her mouth slightly raised. She replied coquettishly, "Since you asked, then for your sake, I will stay." As she spoke, she casually raised her hand and gently stroked her fair, slender neck. Suddenly, her eyes widened, her face turned pale, and she screamed in horror, "Oh my God! My jewelry necklace is gone. It's worth tens of millions." With this scream, the entire venue fell into chaos. The loss of a jewelry necklace worth tens of millions is no small matter. If it cannot be found, it will definitely be considered a shocking case. Deputy squad leader who remained calm in the face of danger. He quickly and calmly instructed the security guards, "Why are you still standing there? Call the police. Seal off the entire scene, close the gate, and don't let anyone in or out. I dare to conclude that the person who stole the jewelry is still at the scene." Upon hearing Deputy Squad Leader Hu's instructions, the security guards immediately took action. While they were hurriedly dialing the police, they were also scrambling to close the entrances and exits of the venue. The crowd walking back and forth in the venue at this time also became panicked because of this sudden change. Everyone was pushing and crowding, and the scene became more and more chaotic. Ye Rong was also pushed around in the crowd. She raised her hand to cover her strapless dress, fearing that someone would step on her skirt. "I accidentally touched my neck." At this moment, her neck was empty. The jewelry worth tens of millions that Gu Yanchen had personally put around her neck in the morning disappeared without a trace. "My necklace." Ye Rong was shocked. When was it lost? She had no recollection of the necklace at all. She was extremely anxious, and beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. Chapter 24: Being mistaken for a thief. That was a necklace worth tens of millions, and it was also the first gift Gu Yanchen gave her. It is of great significance. How could she lose it? She was so careless. She thought anxiously, trying to remember when the necklace might have been lost. The first place she could think of where it might have been was in the bathroom stall. It must be that the impact of the basin of water was too great, and the necklace was washed away at that time. When she thought it might be the bathroom, she became anxious and raised her foot, lifted her skirt and walked towards the bathroom. However, he was stopped by Deputy Squad Leader Hu as a suspicious person. He stared at Ye Rong suspiciously and asked, "Ye Rong, where are you going in such a hurry?" Ye Rong's face was full of anxiety, and he said quickly, "I dropped something important, I have to go to the bathroom quickly." When Liu Banhua, who was standing by, heard this, she immediately gave him a sharp look. She took 2 steps at a time and walked up to Ye Rong. Without saying a word, she reached out and grabbed her arm tightly. He shouted angrily, "Humph! Did you steal my jewelry necklace and now you want to take the opportunity to slip away? Tell the truth, do you have any accomplices?" As he spoke, he secretly increased the strength in his hands and pushed Ye Rong mercilessly. Caught off guard, Ye Rong staggered and almost fell to the ground. Ye Rong, who has been engaged in cleaning work for more than 10 years, is now facing the fierce accusations. She stood still calmly, gently brushed off the dust on her hands, and gracefully adjusted her slightly wrinkled dress. She said calmly with a firm look in her eyes, "You said I stole your jewelry. Well, show me the evidence. You are slandering others without any evidence. That is a crime of false accusation. I can take you to court." Liu Banhua sneered, with a hint of disdain in her eyes. "Evidence? Once I search your body, everything will become clear." He then gave a look to Li Xiqing and Wang Dan beside him. This look was sharp and fierce, and no one could disobey. Li Xiqing and Wang Dan understood what was going on and immediately approached Ye Rong with a fierce look on their faces. Realizing that the situation was not good, Ye Rong's heart tightened and he involuntarily took 2 steps back. The next second, one of them grabbed Ye Rong's arm without giving any explanation and held her tightly. "What do you want to do?" Ye Rong's eyes were full of fear and he tried to break free several times. But Li Xiqing and Wang Dan were far more powerful than her. Seeing that she couldn't get away, she said anxiously and angrily, "Let me go. It's broad daylight. What you are doing is illegal. I'm going to call the police." After hearing Ye Rong's threat, Liu Banhua was not afraid at all, but became even more arrogant. She walked arrogantly, step by step, towards Ye Rong, and then stood firmly. There was a moment's silence. Suddenly, Liu Banhua raised her hand and slapped Ye Rong hard. The crisp sound of slaps echoed in the air, making people tremble with fear. "You stole something and yet you're still so arrogant. You're so old, and you don't feel ashamed." Liu Banhua's eyes were vicious and her face was full of contempt. "Stop slandering me here." Ye Rong's eyes became extremely sharp, and he retorted without flinching, "The entire venue is full of surveillance cameras. Do you think you can just frame me?" When Liu Banhua heard this, she was stunned at first. She didn't expect that the uneducated Ye Rong mentioned the surveillance camera again. With this reminder, she should ask the security guard to delete all the surveillance videos of today. After all, her necklace wasn't lost at all. At this time, Deputy Class Leader who was standing nearby, quickly echoed behind him, "Yes, yes, yes, let's check the surveillance footage immediately. No matter what the cost, we must get back the jewelry necklace that the class beauty lost." Class Flower Liu interrupted Deputy Class Leader Hu and said firmly, "No need to check the surveillance, my jewelry necklace is on Ye Rong." After that, he threw the glass of red wine in his hand fiercely towards Ye Rong's face. "Do you admit it or not?" In an instant, red liquid splashed all over Ye Rong's face and flowed down her cheeks. With red wine splashed all over his face, Ye Rong shook his head vigorously and barely opened his eyes. He angrily questioned, "Are you crazy? I have told you many times that I never took your necklace." Class Flower Liu smiled coldly, then crossed her arms and said in a haughty manner, "Humph, you are so stubborn. If you don't accept my toast, you will be punished. Deputy Class Leader Hu, I will give you a chance to show your ability. The job of searching your body will be handed over to you." As she spoke, a hint of doubt flashed across her eyes. She had long seen that deputy monitor who had been drooling over Ye Rong's body. Hearing this, Ye Rong opened his eyes wide and said angrily, "Liu Qianqian, do you dare?" At this moment, she really regretted attending such a class reunion full of monsters and calculations. Liu Banhua was not intimidated by Ye Rong's momentum at all. She smiled contemptuously and urged, "What are you waiting for? Why don't you do it now?" Upon hearing the instructions from Class Flower Liu, Deputy Class Leader Hu immediately looked at Ye Rong with gleaming eyes. The purpose of his organizing the class reunion was to take advantage of Liu Banhua's influence and cling to her husband, who was the richest man in the country, to obtain financing. As for the fights between these women, he didn't bother to care about them. He just wanted to seize this opportunity to please Liu Banhua. As for Ye Rong, she can only blame herself for her bad luck. She offended someone she shouldn't have offended. But it just gave him a chance to perform. If the lost jewelry was really found on Ye Rong, then he would have accomplished a great feat. Thinking of this, a cunning gleam flashed in Deputy Monitor Hu's eyes. He couldn't wait to walk towards Ye Rong with a malicious smile on his face. He just stretched out his big, greasy hands and reached them towards Ye Rong without any hesitation. His lustful expression exposed his manly nature without any concealment. Ye Rong struggled desperately, watching the disgusting hand getting closer and closer. Ye Rong felt a sense of despair and nausea. She clenched her teeth, closed her eyes, and prepared to endure the coming humiliation. At the critical moment, a strong male voice came from the back of the crowd. "Stop." The voice was like thunder, instantly breaking the tense atmosphere at the scene. Everyone turned their heads at the same time, wanting to see who was so bold. Chapter 25: Who Bullies My Woman? The hand that deputy squad leader who stretched out to cause trouble was also suspended in mid-air. Ye Rong opened his eyes and breathed a sigh of relief. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice and saw a figure slowly walking towards them from behind the crowd. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be Jingji, the class monitor in school back then. At this moment, he had a righteous look on his face, and every step he took carried an invisible pressure. He has sharp eyebrows and bright eyes, an upright posture, and exudes an aura. When he passed by Ye Rong, he first looked at her with concern, then turned his gaze to everyone, his eyes full of majesty. "You are all well-known figures now. Why do you bully your classmates like this?" Jingji's voice was not loud, but every word was clear and powerful. "Is it appropriate?" It was obvious that he came to protect Ye Rong. Facing Jingji's questioning, Liu Banhua did not show any weakness. She raised her delicate and slightly contentious face and said, "Hey, isn't this our class leader of Jing University? When did the wind from Paris, France, blow you back?" As she spoke, her eyes flickered with provocation. Then, Liu Banhua sneered and added, "After so many years, you still like to play the role of a hero saving a beautiful girl." Her words were full of sarcasm and disdain. Those at the party today are either wealthy ladies, famous aristocrats, or business upstarts. Which one of you will be on the media headlines tomorrow? Jingji took off his leather gloves slowly. Then he raised the corners of his mouth slightly, and said with a smile, "If such a thing were to spread out at this class reunion, it would probably become explosive news tomorrow morning." His eyes vaguely swept over Liu Banhua and others. Hearing this, the originally aggressive Liu Banhua's face suddenly darkened. "Are you threatening me?" When they were students, Jingji protected Ye Rong in this way. I didn't expect that after so many years, when they met again, he was still protecting Ye Rong in this way. She couldn't help but wonder if the two of them were doing something shameful. Jingji responded calmly, "How can you say it's a threat? I'm just thinking about you students." As he spoke, his eyes slowly swept around him, his expression solemn and serious. As expected, these words full of positive energy instantly won unanimous recognition and agreement from the surrounding students. Everyone nodded in agreement, expressing their appreciation and support for Jingji. Under pressure, Liu Banhua had no choice but to exchange glances with Li Xiqing and Wang Dan. They reluctantly let go of Ye Rong's hands and let her go for the time being. "Are you okay?" Jingji leaned down slightly and asked in a low voice with concern. Ye Rong shook his head slightly, not wanting to attract too much attention. He lowered his head silently, and gently rubbed his red wrist with his other hand. As expected, she is a rich lady, very generous. Jingji raised his mouth slightly, smiling, and raised his glass to Liu Banhua. "Come, I'll toast you." Seeing this, Liu Banhua showed a forced smile, raised her glass reluctantly and responded, "Thank you. This is the man full of justice in front of you." Thinking back to when she was still a young girl, she had secretly had a crush on the man in front of her. At that time, Jingji had excellent grades, was sunny and handsome, and exuded an aura of integrity and kindness, which deeply attracted her. It's really ridiculous to think about it now. It's a pity that Jingji is too stubborn. Every time when she made things difficult for Ye Rong, he would always jump out first. He stood by Ye Rong without hesitation, defending that woman and even confronting her head-on. This made Liu Banhua very annoyed, and she felt depressed. "Ye Rong took my jewelry necklace, isn't it wrong for me to search her body?" Liu Banhua finally couldn't hold back her inner dissatisfaction and questioned angrily. She stared at Jingji with her big innocent eyes, wanting to get a satisfactory answer from him. Jingji glanced at the embarrassed Ye Rong and slowly took out a USB flash drive from his arms. "This is the video of the 8 surveillance cameras in the venue. It can prove that Ye Rong has never approached you, let alone taken your necklace. Of course, you can also see He didn't say the second half of the sentence, his eyes fixed on Liu Banhua. Of course, we can see from the surveillance video that it was Liu Banhua who hid the necklace herself and deliberately framed Ye Rong. Liu Banhua, who was caught with the handle, knew she was in the wrong and immediately said with a smile, "The squad leader is really capable. No wonder he is the most famous reporter in Paris. He is really capable." She deliberately emphasized the word ability. Then, she pursed her lips gently, smiled sweetly, and then stretched out a jade hand and placed it naturally on Jingji's broad shoulders. At the same time, she twisted her waist, showing her charm to Jingji. She continued in a delicate voice, "Since the monitor is so capable, I'd like to trouble you, the great reporter, to help me find the necklace." Facing the class beauty who showed interest in him, Jingji remained calm. "It's the police who have to find things." Jingji pushed away the white arm on his shoulder. "I just hope that my classmates are not wrongly accused." After being ruthlessly rejected, Liu Banhua's face instantly fell, and she said angrily, "Are you in charge of this matter?" At this moment, Liu Banhua has completely torn off the mask of disguise, and the anger and jealousy in her heart erupted like a volcano. Because in her opinion, Jingji's protection of Ye Rong was simply the biggest provocation and insult to her. Moreover, the more she thought about it, the more unwilling she felt. Why would Jingji always protect that good-for-nothing Ye Rong? She has been protecting him since her student days and she is still protecting him now. As a rich girl and the most beautiful girl in class, she is unwilling to lose to such an inconspicuous person like Ye Rong. Why should Jingji protect a person who is being trampled in the mud like this? Yes. Jingji answered decisively and resoundingly. Liu Banhua was so angry that she stamped her feet. She held up the hem of her gorgeous dress and said coquettishly like a little princess who had been wronged, "I'm so mad." Liu Banhua raised her chin and said proudly, "Humph, let me tell you, my husband is the world's richest man, Gu Yanchen. He will be here soon, and I'll see how he will deal with you ignorant guys." A hint of doubt flashed across Ye Rong's eyes. Will Gu Yanchen really come? Seeing that Liu Banhua spoke so seriously and with such a confident expression, it doesn't seem like she is lying, right? Could it be that Liu Banhua is Gu Yanchen's real wife? Once this idea came up, it began to grow wildly in Ye Rong's heart like weeds. But I just got the marriage certificate with him. Has he been lying to himself? But I am old and have no money, so what is there to be cheated about? Ye Rong was upset at the moment. If she didn't come to the class reunion, Gu Yanchen would still be kept in the dark. But then again, it was Gu Yanchen who encouraged her to attend the class reunion. He even blocked her in the bathroom in the morning. Asked again and again, "Who bullies my woman?" An arrogant voice resounded through the sky. I saw Liu Banhua holding up her skirt with a wronged look on her face. She said delicately, "Husband." Everyone looked in the direction of their voice, wanting to see what the legendary world's richest man looked like. Chapter 26. Please lock up Crouching Dragon and Phoenix. I saw a prominent young man in an expensive black suit slowly walking down the stairs from the second floor of the venue. Liu Banhua immediately went up to him and said delicately, "Hubby, it's all my fault. I accidentally lost the jewelry necklace you gave me. It's just a necklace. What's important is you." The young man said as he hooked his big hand and held Liu Banhua's slender waist. The two of them showed their affection in public. "Hate it, there are so many outsiders here." Liu Banhua raised her pink fist and gently hit the young man's chest. Such a loving couple attracted the envy of others, especially the two sisters of Liu Banhua. Li Xiqing and Wang Dan's faces were frozen from smiling. But she didn't even get a glance from Liu Banhua's husband. "If you bully my woman, I am against GU International. Today, I want all of you here to be buried with me." The young man raised his hand domineeringly, looked down on everyone, and held Liu Banhua in his arms. Willow Branch Flower nestled in the man's arms like a little bird, with a shy and intoxicated look on her face. What's going on here? This guy must have read a lot of domineering novels. And he was buried with them all. Ye Rong couldn't help but complain in his heart. Deputy squad leader who stepped forward and flattered him, "Who is this? I'm afraid I'll scare you to death if I tell you." Liu Banhua held her head high, with the air of a queen. "This is Gu Yanchen, the new president of GU International, the richest man in the world." Liu Banhua showed off while holding the fake Gu Yanchen's hand. "My husband. Oh my." Deputy squad leader who slapped his shiny forehead, his mouth grinning from ear to ear with joy. Nice to meet you, Mr. Gu. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person one day. He stretched out his hands excitedly. He never thought that one day he would be able to meet the world's richest man in person. He would definitely burn incense to pray to his ancestors when he returned home. It must be because of the good deeds of his ancestors that he has received this honor. Fake Gu Yanchen put his hands in his pockets proudly, showing no intention of shaking hands with Deputy Monitor Hu. Ye Rong, who had been silent all this time, finally couldn't help but speak. You said he is Gu Yanchen. At this moment, she finally felt relieved. Because this Gu Yanchen is not that Gu Yanchen. She shouldn't have doubted Gu Yanchen. How could such an upright man like Gu Yanchen lie to her? Besides, she is just a cleaner, why would Gu Yanchen lie to her? Liu Banhua rolled her eyes to the sky and said, Are you worthy of calling Gu Yanchen by his name? Yes, Mr. Gu. Ye Rong laughed in silence. Look at how poor you are. Have you ever seen the richest man in the world? Liu Banhua's eyes were full of contempt, and her nose was raised to the sky. I've definitely never seen it before. Ye Rong agreed. Today I finally opened my eyes. Are you the one who stole my wife's jewelry? The fake Gu Yanchen asked coldly without even looking at Ye Rong. Ye Rong looked up and down at this fake Gu Yanchen. They look average and are average in height, and the only similarity is their age. I wonder what this person's purpose is in impersonating Gu Yanchen. Did Liu Banhua know? Or didn't she know? Or did she deliberately find someone to impersonate her? Gu Yanchen's saving face. A series of questions burst into Ye Rong's mind. My husband is asking you a question, are you speechless? Liu Banhua stared at Ye Rong harshly. You don't dare to speak. A poor cleaner is not worthy of attending a class reunion for a class of upper-class people like us. Ye Rong clicked her tongue twice. I've tolerated you for a long time. Stop calling me a cleaner. What? Aren't cleaners people? Without cleaners, would you have such a neat and clean venue? It's true that I am a cleaner, and I'm not as noble as you, but I make money by my own strength. Is there anything wrong with that? Ye Rong's powerful retort left Liu Banhua speechless. You said I stole your necklace. There's no evidence. The squad leader produced evidence that I was not there, but you refused to look at it. You are clearly targeting me. Ye Rong looked calm and confident. Every word he said makes sense. Liu Banhua felt guilty and her eyes were wandering. When did Ye Rong become so eloquent? And I think that as the richest man in the world, your husband would not be so petty as to embarrass a small cleaner like me. Ye Rong planned to praise the fake Gu Yanchen to death first. After all, you shouldn't hit a smiling person, especially those upper-class people who care about their reputation. She thought that if the fake Gu Yanchen lost his temper, it would mean he had no vision. In front of so many people, he would not collude with his wife. I never expected this. My wife is right. A cleaner is just a cleaner. You are a cheap thing. How can my wife target you? Don't you see your own identity? The fake Gu Yanchen raised his eyebrows. Hearing this eager look of protecting his wife, Liu Banhua was immediately overjoyed and said, Why don't you blast these cockroaches out? They are not worthy of breathing under the same sky with us. Yes. Deputy squad leader Hu nodded in agreement. He turned to Ye Rong and said viciously, Get out now, don't dirty the eyes of Mr. Gu and Mrs. Gu. You? Ye Rong was furious at the ugly face of the deputy monitor. If my necklace hadn't been left here, I wouldn't have stayed for even a minute even if you gave me money. Li Xiqing curled her lips and said, TSK, our Mrs. Gu said she lost her necklace, and you also said you lost your necklace. If you want to stay and get money, you should find a reliable reason. It's just a fake item that yours, which is only worth a few dollars, so even if it's really lost, I'm afraid no one will pick it up. Wang Dan fanned himself pretentiously and walked around Ye Rong deliberately. The two of them sang the same tune, fearing that if they didn't say a word less, Mrs. Gu would be unhappy. They are facing the world's richest man. This is such a rare opportunity, and they also want to establish a relationship with the Gu family. You know, most of the real estate in Liqing belongs to the Gu family, not to mention other cities. If they can establish this relationship, their already wealthy family can be said to be even more wealthy. It wouldn't be a bad idea to dump her incompetent husband and find a third-generation rich man with outstanding abilities through Gu Yanchen's connections. Wang Dan smiled secretly, his wish came true. Her necklace is worth tens of millions, but mine is only worth a few dollars. Ye Rong snorted coldly, you really look down on others. The necklace I wear is the only one in the whole world, not to mention the whole city. Har har har, I'm dying of laughter. Listen, what crazy things is this woman saying? Wang Dan covered his mouth with a fan and laughed so hard that he couldn't straighten his back. Why don't you kick this crazy woman out? Fake Gu Yanchen gave a majestic order. I'll leave by myself once I find my things. Ye Rong didn't bother to glance at the fake guy. In her opinion, he was not even as good as a hair of Gu Yanchen. I said, my wife and I don't want to see cockroaches. The fake Gu Yanchen's eyes were cold, without a trace of emotion. Security, throw this bad apple out. Deputy squad leader who shouted at the security guard at the door. Chapter 27 His Coming. The top floor of Gu's International Building. After a 2-hour conference call with Deputy Minister Naros, Gu Yanchen rubbed his brows in a slightly irritated manner. He slowly took off the Bluetooth headset on his ears and threw it on the desk beside him. He closed his laptop, stood up with a stern expression, and buttoned up his suit. He stretched out his long legs, walked out of the office and headed towards the elevator. Seeing this, Kobayashi, the assistant who had been waiting nearby, hurriedly followed and reached out to press the elevator button. After entering the elevator, Xiaolin carefully took out a bottle of beautifully packaged Australian water from his briefcase and handed it to Gu Yanchen respectfully. Boss, drink some water to moisten your throat. Gu Yanchen took the water bottle without even looking at it, unscrewed the lid and took a sip. Soon, the elevator arrived at the underground garage. As soon as the door opened, a cool breeze blew in my face. Gu Yanchen walked out expressionlessly and went straight to the black Maybach parked in the corner. The driver, Xiao Liu, quickly stepped forward and opened the door for him. After Gu Yanchen got into the car, Xiao Liu gently closed the door, walked around to the other side, got in the car and sat in the driver's seat, started the car, and sped towards the airport. This time, Gu Yanchen is going to DD Chieftainship to attend a crucial mineral summit to discuss a large-scale project worth trillions. Since he took over as president of the company, his already extremely busy life has become even busier. In the eyes of outsiders, he is an enviable successful person with endless wealth, glamorous appearance and high social status. Even if he doesn't work, the huge amount of wealth is enough for him to squander for dozens of lifetimes. However, only Kobayashi, the personal assistant, knows how hard the boss works behind the seemingly glamorous background. On weekdays, Gu Yanchen had almost no personal entertainment activities, was not interested in women, and had no bad habits. I devote most of my time to work and occasionally attend some high-end business receptions. When I'm not working, I'm either in the gym or swimming. The rest of the time is spent dealing with various documents and affairs. In Kobayashi's eyes, his boss was like an emotionless machine. Although he recently married a new wife, he felt that not much had changed. In the spacious, bright and luxuriously decorated airport VIP room, Gu Yanchen sat elegantly on a comfortable sofa chair and read today's Global Times. Rather than looking at his phone to get fragmented information, he prefers to read newspapers from around the world to learn about major events in various countries. At this moment, he was concentrating on reading an analytical report on the international economic situation. At this moment, a slight vibration came from his trouser pocket, and his mobile phone received a new message. Gu Yanchen slowly put down the newspaper in his hand, took out his mobile phone calmly and unlocked it. As he read the content of the message, his brows gradually frowned. He stood up suddenly and walked out of the room with an anxious look on his face. Xiaolin came back from getting his boarding pass and asked in confusion, "Boss, where are you going?" Gu Yanchen walked on without stopping, and without even turning his head, he said coldly, "Cancel all activities." Before he finished speaking, the other person had already walked away, leaving Xiaolin standing there alone, with a look of surprise on his face. At the same time, at Ye Rong's class reunion on the other side, the atmosphere was tense. Ye Rong lost her necklace and refused to leave. And the fake Gu Yanchen issued an expulsion order against her. Jing Ji, who had been standing silently and watching coldly, suddenly said, "It seems that I came to the wrong place." After that, he turned to look at Ye Rong and gently advised, "Ye Rong, let's go." Ye Rong, who was immersed in thought, was interrupted by Jingji's sudden suggestion. She stared at Jingji with a blank look on her face. Without waiting for her to react, Jingji took her hand and strode out of the venue. Ye Rong, who was wearing high heels and a floor-length dress, was a little embarrassed by Jingji's sudden action. But because her skirt was too long and her high heels were not stable, she walked unsteadily and could only keep up with Jingji's pace with difficulty. Just as the two were approaching the entrance of the venue, the door of the venue was slowly pushed open from the outside. The tall and straight Gu Yanchen suddenly appeared at the door. I saw that he exuded a powerful aura that was intimidating and kept people away. Gu Yanchen raised his eyelids with dignity and stared at Jingji's hand that was holding Ye Rong with his narrow and sharp eyes. At this time, Ye Rong finally saw Gu Yanchen standing at the door. She was immediately surprised and asked, "You, why are you here?" Seeing Ye Rong's surprised expression, Gu Yanchen gently took her hand from Jingji and put it under his armpit and said gentlemanly, "Madam, I'm late." Jingji on the side widened his eyes and stared at the young man in front of him in disbelief. It was really hard for him to imagine that such a young man with extraordinary temperament and elegant demeanor could be Ye Rong's husband. At this moment, Jingji's heart was filled with shock. What kind of creature is this again? Let in all kinds of cats and dogs. The fake Gu Yanchen, who was standing not far away, shouted loudly with impatience on his face, his voice sharp and piercing. He was seen with his arms folded across his chest, his head slightly tilted up, and an extremely arrogant and contemptuous look in his eyes. He looked like a dandy, self-righteous young man who looked down on others. My Gu family really gave you some face. The fake Gu Yanchen continued to speak wildly, not taking the other people present seriously at all. His arrogant and domineering attitude attracted the attention of people around him. But most people dare not speak out. After all, no one wants to provoke the Gu family easily. Gu family. Gu Yanchen squinted and looked at the fake Gu Yanchen in the conference hall not far away. How come he doesn't know that there is such a person in his Gu family? Ye Rong beside him leaned close to Gu Yanchen's ear and whispered in a low voice, "He said he is Gu Yanchen." Hearing this, Gu Yanchen was stunned at first, and then he couldn't help but burst out laughing. Someone actually dared to impersonate him and show off in front of him so blatantly. Quite interesting. It looks like today's party is going to be quite exciting. On the other side, the fake Gu Yanchen didn't realize that the real Gu Yanchen had arrived at the scene, and was still chattering and shouting. "Kick these people out. Okay, Mr. Gu, you are a bunch of ungrateful cockroaches, I will teach you a lesson." Deputy squad leader who was fat and short, half a head shorter than Gu Yanchen, suddenly rushed out. At this moment, he raised his fist fiercely and swung it towards Gu Yanchen. This sudden scene made Ye Rong tremble with fear. She opened her eyes wide and watched the huge fist rushing towards Gu Yanchen like a gust of wind.